Chapter 1092. In a dark space somewhere, a pale-skinned, lean old man came to a valley. Before he could speak, a voice came from the valley. Disobedient official? This old man was the king of the underworld's right-hand man, disobedient official King Seekong-yu. He replied, "Your Majesty, that is me." Slowly, Seekong-yu said, "Our connection with Lord Underworld was suddenly cut off. Not only him, but the two nether sea realms that he controlled also lost contact. I contacted Lord Underworld's disciple, Gongzi Zhe, but there was no result." After a moment of silence in the valley, the voice sounded again. "I already know about the matter. You can go down first and be on guard. If the netherworld is exposed, it is very likely that the Void Temple and the Celestial Sect of Wonders will find clues and find us." Seekong-yu replied, "Yes, Your Majesty." Then he bowed and left the valley. There was a small lake in the valley. Silently sat a young man by the lake. He was handsome and looked to be about 10 years old, but his eyes were calm and distant. This young man was naturally the reborn king of the underworld. He looked at the lake in front of him and fell in a deep thought. After a moment, he opened his palm, and a gray stream of light appeared in his palm. These gray streams of light floated in midair and manifested themselves. They condensed into half-black, half-white life and death underworld Tao fruits. The king of the underworld looked at the Tao fruits in front of him, and his eyes finally fell on 3 of them. Unlike the other Tao fruits, there were vague figures flashing in these 3 Tao fruits. The king of the underworld pointed with his finger, and the other Tao fruits turned into gray streams of light and dissipated, leaving only these 3 Tao fruits. Looking at these 3 life and death underworld Tao fruits, the king of the underworld's expression was calm. He picked one out and separated it from the other 2. Then he put the 3 life and death underworld Tao fruits away and closed his eyes again. Silently, he meditated. In the dark sea realm that Lin Feng and the others were in, Xinmin Tianzong and the others were standing in a small building by the side of the giant red lake, looking at the lights that appeared before them. The first person to appear in front of everyone was a tall young man. His hair was disheveled and messy, and he wore a brown linen robe that looked a little shabby. However, his unkempt appearance could not conceal his domineering, heroic, and high-spirited aura. Even if it was just a projection of light, one could still see the elegant demeanor of a real person. Apart from Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, and Zhu Yi, the other people also felt a great sense of pressure when facing this figure of light projected by the remnant mana aura. The linen-robed young man in front of them was the leader of the 4 ancient heroes of the Taishu Temple, Wen Qiyang, who shouldered the divine lands and guarded Tianhuang all by himself. Since ancient times, it was publicly acknowledged that after the Taishu Taoist, this person was the #1 expert in the history of the Taishu Temple. In fact, after the Taishu Taoist had been seriously injured in his battle with Juehuang Xuanshang, Wen Qiang had been the #1 expert in the Taishu Temple at that time. And after the Taishu Taoist had gone to the Dead Sea, Wen Qiang guarded the Divine Land. After many years of cultivation, his strength had grown further, and he had already surpassed the time when he had fought to a draw with Juehuang Xuanshang. It was said that before the battle with Jihuang Xinyuan, Wen Qiang was not necessarily inferior to his master, the Taishu Taoist, when he was at his peak. However, after the Taishu Taoist had gone to the Dead Sea, although there was no further news of him, it was still not confirmed that he was dead. It was also unknown whether the Taishu Taoist had made any further progress in the Dead Sea. In addition, he was after all the master of Wen Qiang, so everyone, including Wen Qiang himself, had always tacitly agreed that the Taishu Taoist was still the #1 expert in the history of the Taishu Temple and even the entire Divine Land. And in the long years when the Taishu Taoist and Juehuang Xuanshang had gone to the Dead Sea, and the Haotian Mirror had been extremely weak, it was Wen Qiang who had deterred the demons of infinite wasteland domain. He was also one of the few people in the history of the Tianyuan world who could single-handedly suppress the Saint Emperor of the Demon Clan. After the 2 reigns of the Astro Sovereign and Xia Huang, although Wen Qiang had not become the human sovereign, he had always been recognized as the #1 expert of the human clan at that time. He had personally killed countless great demons. However, there was little news about such a peerless hero. Most of them were just legends about the battles with the demon clan, and few people knew about the other things about his life. Lin Feng nodded slightly. It really is him. But at this moment, the Wen Qiyang that appeared in the light and shadow seemed a bit lonely. He looked slightly dazed, and his eyes were also looking at the small building where he was. Seeing this, Lin Feng thought for a while and flicked his fingers to shoot out a few more streams of Dharma power. At the same time, he made a spell with both hands and said in a low voice, "Guide." The scene in front of them changed again. Wherever the light and shadow of Wen Qiyang reached, there were figures flickering, and an even more blurred picture appeared. Xiao Yin and the others knew that this was the light and shadow image that Wen Qiyang had manifested with his own Dharma power. At this moment, it was restored for the second time by Lin Feng. Because it was an image that manifested from Wen Qiyang's memory, it did not really happen in the small building. In addition, it had been a long time. Therefore, although Lin Feng had restored it with his Dharma power, the light and shadow fragments were still blurred and intermittent. But it could already be seen that in the second restored image, there were mainly two people, a man and a woman. The man was Wen Qiyang. Wen Qiyang, who had always been bold and brave, had a different appearance in this image. His expression was gentle, which was rare, and his eyes were filled with love as he looked at the woman beside him. The woman's appearance was elegant and refined, and her temperament was noble. Like the clouds in the sky, it was unforgettable. But what was more eye-catching was that her abdomen was bulging. She was clearly pregnant. Sitting on the soft chair, she gently stroked her abdomen with a sweet expression. Her face was filled with the radiance of motherhood, and from time to time, her gaze met with Wen Qiyang's, which was also filled with love. Wen Qiyang held her hand and said softly, "I'm going." The woman's eyes were instantly filled with worry. According to the news from Infinite Wasteland, the extreme spirit of Divine Abyss is probably not weaker than Jue Huang Xianshang in the past. Your sex Hao Ian mirror has not been restored. It will be very dangerous for you to go. When Qiyang patted her hand and said slowly, "It is precisely because of this that I have to participate in this battle." He smiled faintly. "Moreover, we will only know the result after the battle." When Qiyang paused for a moment, then looked at the woman in front of him and said softly, "I have no fear in my heart. My only concern is you and my child. If I do not return from this battle, I will not be able to see my child being born and growing up. This will be my greatest regret. But coming back to see you will also be the greatest wish in my heart, and it will give me endless power." He said with a smile, "Stay here. This foreign dimension is very well hidden. Xiaofang Yu will not be able to find this place." The woman frowned slightly. "If I was not pregnant, I would not be afraid of Xiaofang Yu. He wanted to kill me to avenge his son, but my younger sister also died in his hands. I promise you that no matter what, I will let go of the past. But if he comes looking for trouble, I do not care, but I am afraid of hurting my child." When Qiyang said, "In the whole world, only the Haoqian mirror can find this place, but I believe that if anything happens to me, junior brother Yin will still remain silent for the sake of our past relationship. After all, other than Xiaohan wanting to sully you and your sister and being killed by you, you have not taken any other lives. Although junior brother Yin and I have different opinions on some issues, we have been fellow disciples for tens of thousands of years. From the first day he entered the sect, it was me who took the place of master to pass on the arts, helping him build a solid foundation, and watching him grow from a child to an adult." After a moment of silence, the woman called Yuner still smiled. "That's right. You do not have to worry about us. Just do what you want. I believe that you will return here safely, just like during the war between the two realms. I will wait for you here." When Qiyang smiled slightly, kissing her forehead lightly. Then, he turned and left the little building. The scene of the second restoration ended here. Before everyone's eyes, only when Qiyang was left alone again, standing in the little building with a face full of loneliness. Lin Feng and the others now understood that this building was not the other one. The little building that everyone was currently in was constructed by Wen Qiyang using his own transcendence energy, recreating the residence that he had stayed in with his beloved wife in the past. Only here his wife was not there, nor was there the child that he was about to give birth to. It was only him alone. In a situation where he was alone, this legendary, unyielding, and valiant, peerless expert revealed his weak side. However, a heartless person might not necessarily be a true hero. Lin Feng and the others would not underestimate him because of this. A hint of worry vaguely appeared in Wen Qiang's eyes. I fell into the netherworld sea with serious injuries. Although I narrowly escaped death by chance, I was also trapped in the netherworld sea and could not escape. Now that so many years have passed, I wonder if Yin and the others are still well. He looked around the little building and sighed. After today, I will completely enter the center of the netherworld sea. I will not be able to return from here. The loneliness and worry only lasted for a moment. Soon, Wen Qiang's body revealed a high spirit again. This time, if I succeed, I will have a chance to return to the boundless universe. At that time, I will be able to reunite with Yin, and the others. The light and shadow completely stopped here. Wen Qiang's figure gradually turned into thousands of light spots and dispersed in the little building. It turned out that this figure was only a projection of his transcendence energy. Lin Feng and the others were silent. After a long time, Yang Qing said with a slightly dry voice, Xia Fengyu should be Xia Huang's real name? Xia Han seems to be the name of Xia Huang's only son. Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and Li Yuanfang nodded silently. Li Yuanfang said in a deep voice, I have never heard of Wen Qiang having a wife and children. Where could they be now? Zhu Yi shook his head. It is still too early to discuss. We know too little information. But Wen Qiang's wife is a little strange. He looked at Xiao Yin. Xiao Yin nodded slowly. I also felt it, but I did not see it in person. It was the light and shadow left by the power of perception. Moreover, it was the second time it appeared, so I'm a little uncertain. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes. After thinking for a moment, he said lightly, Your feeling is not wrong. Wen Qiang's wife is a demon. Chapter 1093. Xiao Yin and Zhu Yi both looked at Lin Feng. Even though Lin Feng had confirmed their conjecture, they were still surprised. Yang Qing, Li Yuanfang, and the others did not need to be mentioned. Li Yuanfang, who had always been calm and composed, also had a surprised expression on his face. Lin Feng said calmly, Even though I'm not 100% sure if I'm not wrong, Wen Qiang's wife is indeed a demon. It is just that she is not a demon that we normally see. She is very special. She looks like a cloud that is rich in spiritual energy and life. After an unknown amount of time, she actually developed spiritual intelligence and became a demon. You can say that she is a demon, but you can also say that she is a spirit monster. As for the specific situation, because I have not seen it with my own eyes, I cannot make a judgment. Lin Feng looked around the small building. I have heard Song Tiandao Jian and Xian Tianing mention that in ancient times, there was a cloud demon that suddenly appeared. It was shocking and mysterious. Zhu Yi pondered and said, Cloud demon? She does not have any evil aura. Instead, she is as indifferent and elegant as the drifting clouds in the sky. Li Yuanfang's disciple, Tan Yinxing, suddenly said in a low voice, Could it be a honey trap by the demon? After all, before Jihuang Xinyuan rose to power, the Haotian mirror in Taishu Temple had not been restored. Wen Qiang was the strongest enemy of the demon. No, if it must be counted, it would be better to say that it is a honey trap by the human race. Yang Qing said lightly, Even though we do not know when Wen Qiang and the Cloud Demon will be married, it clearly did not affect Wen Qiang's participation in the war between the two realms more than once. Normally, he does not show mercy when dealing with the demon. On the contrary, the Cloud Demon is almost secluded and rarely appears. Lin Feng led everyone out of the small building and came to the side of the giant red lake. He flicked his finger, and a purple cloud fell into the giant lake. Immediately, the giant lake reflected many scenes. The disciples of the younger generation let out low cries of surprise. In the depths of the lake, a young man in hemp robes was sitting cross-legged. His body was wrapped in red chains, binding him tightly in the lake. It was Wen Qiang's figure. After taking a closer look, Tang Jun and the others realized that it was also the light and shadow that had been restored under the condition that the magical power and aura had been retained. Lin Feng looked at the silhouette and nodded slightly. During the battle with Ji Huang Xinyuan, when Qiang was severely injured and on the verge of death, he accidentally fell into the Netherworld Sea. By chance, he entered this lake and managed to survive. However, he was also sucked in by the Netherworld Sea and couldn't escape. After a long time, his injuries gradually recovered. However, his entire person was also half assimilated by the Netherworld Sea in the process of recuperation. In a sense, he became a part of the Netherworld Sea. Lin Feng looked at this world within the Netherworld Sea in front of him. It is very possible that this place wasn't originally a lake. However, in the process of Wen Qiang being here, this place also gradually changed. It turned into a lake and then gave birth to a world within a world. It continued to develop and gave birth to other worlds within a world. For example, the domain space that was occupied by Taoist Yuming. Xiaoyan turned his head to look at the small building by the lake. That small building and the light and shadow inside were all formed by Wen Qiang's yearning for his family. According to his own memories, he used his magical power to project them. As for himself, he had always been trapped in this lake. He lowered his head to look at the flickering red lake water. After that, as his injuries recovered, although he was half assimilated by the Netherworld Sea, he also gained an extremely deep understanding of the Netherworld Sea. Therefore, he gradually found a way to escape from the Netherworld Sea and return to the vast thousand domains. In this process, he gradually gained control of the Netherworld Sea's power. Before this, he had always been trapped in this lake, unable to escape. Therefore, the path of Wen Qiang's exploration should still be within this lake. Lin Feng smiled slightly. That's right. That should be the case. After saying this, he lightly tapped his right index finger on his forehead. The Two Realms Void technique was activated. The war god clone suddenly disappeared, and the person who appeared in front of Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and the others turned into his original body. Lin Feng, whose hair was let loose, wore a purple robe. With a faint smile, he directly used his arcane energy to wrap the group of disciples and plunge them into the lake that was flickering with red light. It's not water, but an extremely profound and dense spiritual qi. It comes from the same source as the Netherworld Sea, but it's a lot calmer and less ferocious. Lin Feng stood in the lake and looked at the flickering images in front of him. In the images, the red chains on Wen Qiang's body gradually merged with his body, no longer binding him. However, Wen Qiang was also unable to break free. It was as if the two had merged into one. When the chains completely merged with his body, Wen Qiang, who was meditating with his eyes closed, opened his eyes and began to sink toward the bottom of the lake. Lin Feng followed the images all the way down and saw a dazzling crimson dot at the deepest part of the lake. It was darker and darker than the other parts of the lake. Wen Qiang's figure slowly sank into the crimson dot and finally disappeared. It was like a door. Master, my evil radiance, overlord sword, and the heavenly calamity stone fragment from the ancient immortal world are both trembling. It's as if that place is attracting them. Xiaoyan's voice sounded in Lin Feng's ear. Lin Feng nodded and directly landed on the crimson dot. In an instant, Lin Feng felt an enormous, twisting force. Even though his original body was inside, he felt waves of discomfort, as if his Yuan spirit was about to be torn apart. However, it only lasted for an instant before it calmed down. The scene in front of Lin Feng also changed. It was a scene of magma in the Earth's core. Under his feet was a cliff, and below him was the boundless Netherworld sea disaster that constantly surged up and down. the nether evil flame, the mysterious heavenly tribulation flame, the blood river true water, the nine nether chilly wind. Countless catastrophes fused together and collided with each other, giving rise to a catastrophic scene. The space was constantly annihilated. In front of him was a long road paved with crimson light. It was like a metal chain bridge that extended into the distance. At the end of the bridge, there was also a patch of red light, making it hard to see clearly. Under the effect of Lin Feng's Fa Li, the image that had been restored by the remnant Fa Li aura of the past was also constantly fluctuating. The space before him was much more unstable than the Netherworld Sea realm. Wen Qiang's image slowly moved forward on the bridge. When Lin Feng stepped onto the bridge, he felt scenes appear before his eyes. Looking closely, he saw that they were all memories of Wen Qiang from the past. This was not left behind by Wen Qiang of his own accord. In the process of moving forward on the bridge, he was also refining the power of the Netherworld Sea in an attempt to gain control of the Netherworld Sea. In this process, he, who was already half-merged with the Netherworld Sea, naturally left his own memories in the Netherworld Sea realm. Walking along this path, Lin Feng seemed to have walked through Wen Qiang's legendary life. When he was young, he became a disciple of the Taishu Taoist and learned Tao from the Taishu Taoist. When his cultivation was still shallow, he showed amazing talent and strength. Later, he gradually grew and became the new mainstay of the Divine Land. Finally, in a shocking battle with Jihuang Xinyuan, he narrowly escaped death and fell into the Netherworld Sea. Lin Feng also passed this information to Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and the others. After reading it, everyone was silent. After a long while, Yang Qing sighed softly. His wife is indeed a demon. However, it is just as you said, Master. In Wen Qiang's memory, the path that he and the Cloud Demon walked together occupied a lot of space. In the past, there were two white clouds that were nourished by the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Beyond everyone's expectations, they developed spiritual intelligence. When Wen Qiang was young, he met one of them by chance. At that time, the white clouds did not understand language. They only communicated with each other through divine sense, but they knew each other. After a long time, the white cloud turned into a demon and tried to find its old friend. Finally, it reunited with Wen Qiang again. Finally, after a long time, the two of them got married. Although few people knew about their marriage, it caused a huge uproar in the upper echelons of the human cultivation world in the Divine Land. Previously, Xiao Huang's son, Xiao Han, had tried to lay his hands on the Cloud Demon sisters and was killed by the Cloud Demon. After Xiao Huang learned of the news, he attacked the Cloud Demon sisters. In the end, the younger sister of the Cloud Demon was killed by Xiao Huang. Later, with Wen Qiang's interference, the two sides reluctantly stopped fighting. However, the hatred still existed. Previously, because of other matters, in the Taishu Temple, Wen Qiang and Yin Xinghe had already disagreed, and the marriage between Wen Qiang and the Cloud Demon had completely intensified the conflict between the two sides. Senior apprentice brother one, why did it have to be like this? The person who spoke was a man dressed in ancient clothes. He had a calm and indifferent expression. He looked 40% to 50% similar to the current abbot of the Taishu Temple, Yin Anlai. He was Yin Xinghe, one of the four ancient heroes of the Taishu Temple, along with Wen Qiang. Wen Qiang looked at him and said calmly, "Xinghe, you are also a person with a family. You should understand." Silently, Yin Xinghe said, "But my wife is not of the demon race." Wen Qiang shook his head. Yin, is different from the other demons. Other than Xiao Han, the sisters have not harmed a single blade of grass or tree in the Divine Land. And what happened back then was the fault of Xia Fanyu and his son. Xia Fanyu wanted to take revenge for his son. That is human nature. But what was he doing? If he had not doted on them, how could Xiao Han be so arrogant and lawless? Yin Xinghe and Wen Qiang looked at each other. Even so, he is a human like us. He is the most suitable human emperor for the Divine Land. Wen Qiang had a complicated look in his eyes. Slowly, he said, "Xinghe, Choosing the emperor is not something we should be doing. In the end, Wen Qiang left the White Cloud Mountain and went far away. Although he often missed his sect, Wen Qiang was satisfied with the loving life he had with his wife. And what made him even happier was that the fruit of his love with Yun Yao was about to be born. After knowing that Yun Yao was pregnant, the short period of time was the happiest time of Wen Qiang's life. In his memories, he was no longer an expert who could sweep through the world. He was no longer the leader of the 4 ancient heroes of the Divine Land. He was like every father who was about to become a father, an ordinary yet anxious man. He liked to let his imagination run wild. While he was filled with joy and anticipation, he was also slightly fearful and uneasy. At the end of the bridge, Wen Qiang stopped and looked at the dazzling red light in front of him. His expression was slightly dazed, but he quickly regained his composure. His gaze was distant, as though he was looking at his wife and child through the barriers of time and space. "My child, although I haven't even seen you with my own eyes, I love you. I hope that you can grow up in a peaceful, happy, and carefree environment." Chapter 1094. In the image presented by the light, Wen Qiang stepped forward and walked into the red light. Lin Feng stood outside the red light. After sensing it carefully for a moment, he also continued forward and walked into the red light. After entering the red light, a strange feeling surrounded Lin Feng. It was as if he was once again in the midst of the calamity of the Netherworld Sea. Moreover, he was completely unable to use his dermic powers to resist it. He could only face the impact of the power of the Netherworld Sea, and it was extremely painful. But on the other hand, it was as if he had become one with the Netherworld Sea. The world of the Netherworld Sea had become a part of his body, and he could control it with ease. This feeling passed in a flash and quickly disappeared. Lin Feng shook his head slightly and saw that he seemed to be in another space. And in this space, the huge red pillar of light that he had seen in the Netherworld Sea that seemed to support the heavens appeared again, standing tall between the sky and the earth. Although there were still layers of the power of the boundaries and the power of the Netherworld Sea blocking him, Lin Feng could clearly feel that he was much closer to the red pillar of light. It seemed far away, but it also seemed to be right in front of him. In this space, Lin Feng carefully observed the pillar of light. He could vaguely see that under the red light, there was actually a huge stone pillar. Although it was a stone pillar, it did not give off a mellow and heavy feeling. Instead, it exuded an extremely sharp aura. It was like a peerless divine weapon standing there silently. 2 profound and ancient characters were faintly discernible on this stone pillar that emitted red light. He could vaguely make out the 2 words, heavenly calamity. Lin Feng spread his sleeves, and Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and the others also landed in the space. Xiao Yin stared blankly at the stone pillar, and a similar red light flashed in his eyes. He opened his palm, and a broken stone appeared in his palm. Silently, it also flashed with the same light, and it was unprecedentedly bright. Xiao Yin took a deep breath and took out the evil, brilliant Overlord Sword. He saw that the surface of the evil, brilliant Overlord Sword also had a red light. This was unprecedented. The first time he had touched the heavenly calamity stone fragment, the evil, brilliant Overlord Sword had not reacted. After that, when he had carried the stone fragment, there had been no reaction. Lin Feng and the others all looked toward Xiao Yin. Xiao Yin composed himself and said in a deep voice, "The throbbing that originates from the depths of my soul, I am related to that stone pillar of red light. However," after a slight hesitation, he continued, "it feels more like a symbiotic relationship." Lin Feng said, "That stone pillar of red light should be the core of the Nether Sea, the key to controlling the power of the Nether Sea. The heavenly disaster fragment stone that the ancient longevity world possesses should be a fragment that fell off from that stone pillar of red light and accidentally landed in the outside world. It's just that before when Qiang completely refined the netherworld was in a completely ownerless state. After this fragment broke away, It did not show anything special. But after Wen Qiang refined it once, the fragment and the netherworld once again resonated and connected. Lin Feng looked at Xiao Yan's evil, brilliant overlord sword. And this treasure's relationship with the stone pillar of red light is not more distant. On the contrary, it is more likely that it is closer. That's why the divine item hid itself and did not show itself. Only now did it react. Xiao Yan nodded. He held the evil, brilliant overlord sword and closed his eyes. Silently, he sensed. His entire body began to flash with a red light. It was incomparably dazzling, as if it was resonating with the stone pillar of red light in the distance, which was separated by layers of domain power. Lin Feng stared at the stone pillar of red light. It is not so easy to control the power of the netherworld. Unlike the Yingxi and Xianhai, which are relatively stable, this place is really too chaotic. He brought Xiao Yan and the rest and continued to move forward, continuously getting closer to that red light stone pillar. In the end, they reached a place that seemed to be very close. In a place near the stone pillar, there seemed to be traces of someone sitting quietly for a long time on the ground. Although this place was very close to the stone pillar of red light, Lin Feng knew that if it was not for Wen Qiang's state of being half-merged with the netherworld sea, it would still not be easy to truly touch the stone pillar. Lin Feng tapped lightly with his finger, and images once again appeared in everyone's mind. They were still memories of Wen Qiang from back then. As expected, they saw him sitting on the platform, facing the stone pillar of red light in front of him. He sat there for many years. To Lin Feng and the others who were browsing through Wen Qiang's memories, it was just an instant. But to Wen Qiang himself, it was a long period of time that could be counted in thousands of years. And in this process, Wen Qiang's body gradually floated up, continuously merging into the stone pillar of red light until his entire body landed on the stone pillar, becoming one with the stone pillar. Only then did Wen Qiang open his eyes and let out a long breath. Although I can already control the power of the netherworld sea, my body is still one with the netherworld sea. If I use all the power within, the damage will also be reflected on my body. Because it comes from my body, I can't even defend against it. I can only accept it calmly. If I use my power to the limit, I might not be able to kill the enemy, but I might send myself to death. More importantly, I still can't escape from the netherworld sea. At best, I can only guide others into the netherworld sea. I still can't return to the vast thousand domains. Wen Qiang murmured to himself, but soon a smile appeared on his face again. However, after a period of hard training, I can successfully leave the netherworld sea. It might be 1,000 years, or it might be 10,000 years, but the day will finally come when I can return to the divine continent. Wen Qiang raised his head slightly and smiled. I wonder how Yun and the others are doing? How is the White Cloud Mountain now? He stretched out his hand and gently drew a line in the void, and a crack suddenly appeared in the space. Correspondingly, in the southern wilderness of the vast thousand domains, in the sky above a desolate and uninhabited area, the space boundary suddenly split open, and a small crack of the netherworld sea appeared. Although he couldn't escape from the netherworld sea, Wen Qiang could break open the crack of the netherworld sea and see the situation outside. Although it was very troublesome, and even such a simple action caused him a burden, Wen Qiang still couldn't wait to break open the crack between the boundaries. He wanted to know the situation of the outside world and see how his wife and children were doing. He wanted to see how the divine land was now. However, with one look, Wen Qiang's heart suddenly sank to the bottom. Before he could find the whereabouts of his wife and children, he saw the flames of war raging in the divine land. Groups of demons were dancing. It was a war between the two worlds that affected the entire Tianyuan Great World. The violent demon power that covered the sky enveloped the entire divine land. In the black smoke, a white ape stood up. Its eyes were blue, and it coldly looked down at the human world. The ape looked ordinary, but its aura was extremely terrifying. It was in the void, but it seemed as if it didn't exist in this world. It was unfathomable. The violent and majestic power combined with the illusory aura. It It was contradictory, yet unified, and it made people's hearts palpitate towards this great demon that seemed to rule the world. When Qi had a deep impression. Divine Abyss, Extreme Spirit. Carefully observing Jihuang Xinyuan, he realized that this demon had completely recovered to the peak state when it had wreaked havoc in the Divine Land. It even seemed to have surpassed it. This made Wen Qiang shocked and angry. Why is it like this? Back then, this macaque should have been heavily injured. Even if the others don't count, at least Xia Fengyu should have enough power to chase after him. Why did he let him escape safely and make a comeback? Ignoring his shock and anger, Wen Qiang stared at the scene in the crack. He saw that the Divine Land was in a state of turmoil. The place where Jihuang Xinyuan had descended was where his sect was located, White Cloud Mountain. A bright mirror hung high on the top of White Cloud Mountain, blocking Jihuang Xinyuan's power and protecting White Cloud Mountain from being harmed. Luckily, the Haotian mirror has recovered to its peak state. Wen Qiang relaxed a little, but then he suddenly tensed up. But if the Divine Abyss Extreme Spirit attacks other places in the Divine Land, the Haotian mirror won't be able to protect them. The result will be a massacre. He carefully observed White Cloud Mountain, and his heart sank. Is Xing he no longer here? Right now, the disciple of our sect who is activating the Haotian mirror probably hasn't experienced the tribulation yet. In this case, after a long battle, he won't have enough power and will be easily taken advantage of by the Divine Abyss Extreme Spirit. If the Haotian mirror is injured, no one in the world will be able to stop the Divine Abyss Extreme Spirit. When Qiang saw this scene and fell silent, his eyes kept fluctuating, and his mind was in an unprecedented state of chaos. In the minds of Lin Feng and the others, they saw Wen Qiang's light shadow suddenly split into two, facing each other. One of them was expressionless, and his eyes were extremely calm, as if he didn't care about what happened just now. The other one was worried. Master, does Wen Qiang have two personalities in his heart? Yang Qing asked. Lin Feng shook his head. That's not the case. This is the process of thinking in his heart. Or, you can say, he is questioning his soul. The expressionless Wen Qiang asked. If you go now, you can only use the power of the Netherworld Sea to fight against the Divine Abyss Extreme Spirit. No matter who wins or loses, you won't be able to escape death. When Qiang, who looked worried, slowly shook his head. His gaze was firm. My heart is fearless, but as long as I, Wen Qiang, am still alive, I will help my compatriots of the human clan in the Divine Prefecture until I die. The expressionless one, Qiang asked, You have already died once for the Divine Land. Do you want to die again? The opposite when Qiang smiled calmly. I am never afraid of death. The expressionless when Qiang continued. Your wife, you have promised to reunite with her and take care of her forever. She has been waiting for you. Your unborn child, you have not even seen his appearance with your own eyes, and your child has not seen his father's appearance with his own eyes. Only at this moment, when Qiang's face showed a heroic expression. His expression showed a rare sense of loss and sadness, but he still shook his head. Now, I can only choose to believe in Xinghe and the others. I have a wife and children. The millions of people in this divine land also have their own wives and children, their own relatives, and their own families. When Qiang's expression was firm and sad. My parents died in the hands of the demon clan. I don't want such a tragedy to happen to others. The expressionless Wen Qiang continued. Now that you have joined the war, you have completely merged with the Netherworld Sea. You can't even communicate with others or leave any messages. No one knows the pain you have suffered all these years. No one knows what you have done today. No one knows how much you have sacrificed. No one knows that you have returned to the divine land and died again for them. No, the opposite when Qiang smiled slightly. The deserts, mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas of the divine land, they all know that I have returned. At this point, the expressionless figure disappeared. The valiant man in linen roared to the sky, and the red stone pillar rose from the ground. The entire netherworld sea was stirred up and a violent turbulence rolled him up, rushing towards the divine land. When Qiang's figure had disappeared, and even his voice was gone. However, it was as if the world was echoing with his hearty laughter. Monkey from the divine abyss, don't be arrogant. When Qiang is here. Chapter 1095. The laughter that seemed to echo between heaven and earth was the last trace that when Qiang left in this world. After that, the scene in front of Lin Feng and the others disappeared. Now, the red stone pillar called Heaven's Bane stood tall in the netherworld sea again, but when Qiang's figure was nowhere to be seen. Although they could not see what happened after, they knew the gist of it. When Qiang returned to the divine prefecture with the power of the netherworld sea to fight the last battle of his life. In the netherworld sea, his body and spirit were destroyed, and he died completely. The Haotian mirror was also seriously damaged again. In exchange, he turned the tide and finally killed one of the 3 strongest great demons in the history of the Tianyuan world, Jihuang Xinyuan. Lin Feng looked at the red stone pillar in front of him and thought for a moment. Although it was not appropriate to think about it carefully, a sentence came to his mind involuntarily. The green hills bury the loyal bones. The horse wraps the corpse and returns it. Although there was no one in the place, Lin Feng still solemnly cupped his hands. Beside him, Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, Yang Qing, and Li Yuanfang were also silent. After a long time, they solemnly bowed to the place where Wen Qiang sat in the past. Yang Qing sighed softly. In the Great War of the Middle Era, the netherworld sea was monstrous, and a figure was faintly discernible. That figure was indeed Taoist Master Scarlet Sunday. No wonder that figure completely collapsed. For him, as long as he participated in the war, his life and death were already destined. The others nodded silently. After calming down, Zhu Yi looked at the huge stone pillar that was flashing with red light in front of him. It was like a pillar that supported the heavens. Wen Qiang spent a long time and paid a huge price to pave a path for those who came after him to refine and control the netherworld sea. However, it's still extremely difficult to put into practice. Xiaoyan nodded and took a deep breath. He held the evil bright overlord's sword horizontally and pointed it at the red stone pillar in front of him. His other hand held the remnant stone of heavenly disaster, and the red light immediately enveloped his whole body. The light in the stone pillar suddenly became dazzling and resonated with Xiao Yin. In the space between the two, white light suddenly surged, and there was indeed the appearance of the power of domain twisting. As Xiao Yin walked forward step by step, it was as if a door had opened in the space in front of him that was very close to the red light stone pillar. A powerful and mysterious power spread out from within, shocking people. Lin Feng's eyes suddenly lit up, and a light spot appeared between his eyebrows. The light spot flew out and unfolded between heaven and earth, turning into a huge yin and yang life and death formation. And in the center of the yin and yang life and death formation, a huge cauldron that seemed to bear the weight of the divine land suddenly shook. Other than Ding of Shenzhou, Zhu Yi's expression also changed slightly. A golden light lit up above his head, and a magnificent golden bridge that seemed to traverse through the ages and lead the trend of humanity appeared in front of everyone. It was the creation magic treasure that Zhu Yi controlled, the Golden Permitha Bridge. To make 2 creation magic treasures resonate at the same time, the true body of the red stone pillar in front of them was self-evident. This was also a creation magic treasure, and it was a creation magic treasure that was nurtured by the majestic power of the netherworld sea. It accompanied and grew with the netherworld sea. Lin Feng carefully sensed it and nodded slightly. To be precise, it was originally a magic treasure embryo. In the process of Wen Qiang refining the netherworld sea, it gradually matured and completely took shape. It was closely connected with the netherworld sea and Wen Qiang, merging into one. After Wen Qiang's death, this treasure was still in the core of the netherworld sea. Controlling this creation magic treasure, called Heaven's Bane, is equivalent to controlling the netherworld sea. This magic treasure does not exist alone, and its value is not limited to itself. It was originally born in such an ominous place like the netherworld sea, and now it has merged with the netherworld sea. It is really a great evil weapon. The difficulty of refining and subduing it is probably not comparable to other creation magic treasures. Compared to the gentler ones like Ding of Shinjo and the Golden Permitha Bridge, it is even more incomparable. The red light on Xiao Yan's body rolled, and the light and shadow of the calamity of the netherworld sea emerged in his eyes. He said softly, "After seeing this heaven's bane, I understand everything." Lin Feng nodded yes. On the side, Zhu Yi also showed a look of understanding. Yang Qing, Li Yuanfang, and the others looked at him, and Zhu Yi explained, during the process of reincarnation, eldest senior brother's spirit was contaminated with the aura of heaven's bane and the netherworld sea. Moreover, it is the core aura of power. Although weak, it is incomparably pure, close to the source. It is purer than the fragment of the heaven's bane stone that broke off from the stone pillar. It is purer, more source, and more core. Li Yuanfang asked, like Marquis Jing Huan and the ruthless emperor's battle armor. Zhu Yi shook his head. Not so. Marquis Jing Huan, Liang Un, is a part of the ruthless emperor's battle armor's original spirit. It fused with a person's soul, so Marquis Jing Huan is like half a clone of the ruthless emperor's battle armor, half human and half treasure. Speaking of eldest senior brother, his connection with Heaven's Bane is not that close. The two of them are more like companions, growing and strengthening together. The aura of the netherworld sea is like a treasure that he was born with. He looked at Xiao Yan. Heaven's Bane was created by when Qi Yang and the netherworld sea together. When Qi Yang is already dead, but there are still traces of him in Heaven's Bane. When it comes to eldest senior brother, although it is weak, it still exists. That is why Ding of Shinjo rejects eldest senior brother. But because when Qiang's aura is too weak, and it has been refined by Heaven's Bane, Ding of Shinjo's reaction is not that strong. However, right now, Ding of Shinjo's rejection of Heaven's Bane is very obvious. Everyone looked at Ding of Shinjo within the yin and yang life and death formation. As expected, Ding of Shinjo was rejecting the aura coming from Heaven's Bane. Among them, there was the stable power conception of the divine prefecture's creation, the natural hostility against the netherworld sea's calamities, and also the unconscious rejection of the traces left behind by Wen Qiyang. On the other hand, Heaven's Bane did not have any emotional reaction to Ding of Shinjo and the Nirvana Bridge. It was just a resonance between two creation treasures. Lin Feng put away the yin and yang life and death formation and Ding of Shinjo and came to Xiao Yan's side. Let's go. After saying that, he stepped into the door, and Xiao Yan followed closely behind. Zhu Yi and the rest also followed behind. The scene inside the door was chaotic and blurry, but it was dark red, making one feel oppressed. Entering, it made one lose the sense of space and distance. At the same time, one could feel an obvious sluggish feeling around them, as if they were in a quagmire. Heaven's Bane's power and aura were everywhere, but one could not see its true form. Lin Feng and the rest seemed to have entered its body, but it also seemed like they had not really touched this creation treasure. Is it because this treasure is closely connected to the netherworld sea? Lin Feng pondered, and suddenly his heart trembled slightly. He looked in a direction and saw the space there suddenly open, and several figures appeared. It was Yin Nanlai, Wu Mengqi, and Lord Qingning. When the people of Taishu Temple saw Lin Feng, their eyes narrowed slightly. Has his original body come here? Fellow Taoists, how have you been? Lin Feng said calmly. He looked at Yin Nanlai, Wu Mengqi, and the rest, and their situation was much worse than his. In this space, the feeling of being in a quagmire was even more obvious, and it could be said that it was difficult to move forward. Lin Feng understood. Isn't it because the most primitive world within a world where when Qiang lived was close to the stone pillar of heavenly calamity? Yin Nanlai, Wu Mengqi, and Lord Qingning all frowned slightly, especially Wu Mengqi, whose eyes were constantly flashing. Even if the ancient immortals world gave the stone remnant of heavenly calamity to Xianmen Tianzong, they should not be so relaxed. Could it be that Xiao Yan's origin is really related to the Netherworld Sea? His gaze fell on Xiao Yan, full of scrutiny, while Xiao Yan calmly looked at him. Yin Nanlai used his supernatural power to send a voice transmission to Wu Mengqi. Xianmen Tianzong took the initiative. I'm afraid it was because they stepped in here that they triggered the original restriction, which allowed us to enter from another place. Wu Mengqi nodded. The key is likely to be in the first world within the Netherworld Sea. That is the true way to enter, and most likely Xianmen Tianzong and the others entered through that world within a world. What I'm concerned about is, how do they find that place? Xianmen Tianzong's Xiao Yan is most likely hiding some secrets, but I can't feel it right now. Wu Mengqi's eyes narrowed slightly. Here, he seems to have become one with the Netherworld Sea, so I can't see any clues. Yin Nanlai and Lord Qingning's expressions became even more solemn when they heard this. Wu Mengqi had obtained Wen Qiang's legacy and could activate the power of the Netherworld Sea. His related perception in the Netherworld Sea was even more powerful, but he could not see through Xiao Yan. This obviously abnormal situation immediately attracted their attention. At this moment, in another direction, the void suddenly opened up and a figure appeared. It was a youth who looked to be only about 10 years old. His appearance was somewhat unfamiliar, but Lin Feng and Yin Nanlai recognized him at a glance. King of the Underworld? The youth was the reborn king of the Underworld. He looked at Lin Feng and nodded. Master of the Celestial Sect, it's been a long time. He then looked at Yin Nanlai, the current head of the Taishu Temple. Yin Nanlai, seeing you reminds us of Yin Xinghe. Yin Nanlai's expression was calm. King of the Underworld, do you think that now is the time for you to be reminiscing about the past? It would have been fine if you hadn't shown yourself, but since you've appeared here today, then stay here forever. The King of the Underworld was non-committal. The Netherworld Sea is a matter of great importance, and I had no choice but to come. Otherwise, all my years of planning would have been for naught. Furthermore, in this Netherworld Sea, within the world created by Heaven's Bane's aura, even if you want to keep me here, I'm afraid it's still beyond your capabilities. Lin Feng and Yin Nanlai's hearts moved at the same time. His rebirth and recovery of his former strength. Could it be that he's relying on some special ritual to rely on the Netherworld Sea? King of the Underworld, you're being too careless. A silhouette suddenly stepped out from the hole in the void behind Yin Nanlai and the others. She looked to be a 14 or 15-year-old girl with a calm expression and indifferent gaze. She was one of the 4 elders of the previous generation of the Taishu Temple, Lord Qingyi. Even if the Haotian Mirror did not want to delay its own recovery, it would be difficult to send someone into the depths of the Netherworld Sea, which was constantly in a state of chaos, not to mention directly sending someone into the core area where Heaven's Bane was. When Wu Mengqi first entered the Netherworld Sea, Dao Lord Qing, he had already been guided by him, and with the help of the Haotian Mirror, they had descended into the Netherworld Sea together. Seeing Dao Lord Qing-yi, the King of the Underworld expression did not change, and he shook his head slightly. The ones who are being careless are you. You alone are far less of a threat to me than if the Master of the Celestial Sect's true body had descended here. Chapter 1096. As for the King of the Underworld's words, Dao Master Qing-yi was similarly non-committal. The King of the Underworld finished his sentence and did not say anything else. He turned his gaze to Lin Feng and sized up Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, and the others. He raised his eyebrows slightly. Master of the Celestial Sect of Wonders, have you found the first world within the Netherworld Sea where Wen Qiang resided? Lin Feng's lips curled into a smile. He was also sizing up the King of the Underworld. That has nothing to do with you, sir. However, your appearance here is slightly unexpected. The King of the Underworld said calmly, there is no place more suitable than here. Whether it is the Haotian mirror or your sword, if you want to enter here, you'll first have to clash with Heaven's Bane and the entire Netherworld Sea. Whether it is that disciple of yours, Xiao Yin, or that disciple of the Taishu Temple, Wu Mengqi, none of them will be able to suppress it. Heaven's Bane is an extremely ominous weapon. When faced with the even stronger Haotian mirror and Heaven Punishing Sword, it will definitely not choose to submit. It will only resist even more fiercely. However, Heaven's Bane, which is in harmony with the Netherworld Sea, has the leeway to resist. The king of the underworld smiled. By bringing in a Haotian mirror and Heaven Punishing Sword, you will only push Heaven's Bane to my side. I'm naturally happy to see this. Furthermore, if I am not mistaken, if your Jade Capital Mountain wishes to descend into this space, it will also be attacked by the power of the Netherworld Sea. Lin Feng said calmly. Even without the Haotian mirror and Heaven Punishing Sword, do you think you can leave so easily? Or do you think that I and my fellow Taoists from the Taishu Temple will fight against the Netherworld Sea for Heaven's Bane? No matter what happens in the future, we will definitely greet you first. Yin Namlai looked at the king of the underworld and nodded his head slowly as well. King of the underworld, in the ancient age, you have plunged the people into misery and suffering. Now that you have made a comeback, I will not allow you to harm the divine prefecture again. Behind the king of the underworld, arcane energy condensed into a gigantic pure black dragon throne. He sat on it with a relaxed expression, slightly tilting his head to look at Yin Namlai, Taoist Master Qing Wan, and the others. Oh, do I harm the common people? Don't put it in such a nice way. I just don't agree with you. Help the divine prefecture and protect the world. To put it nicely, they're just a bunch of people fighting for power. The king of the underworld clasped his fingers together and placed them flat in front of him. I have ascended to the position of supreme martial artist. Everything under the heavens belongs to me. Everyone who commands the land belongs to me. Yet, your Taishu Temple wants to be a place outside of civilization. If you were like the Taishu Taoist, and when Qiyang, wholeheartedly resisting the demon race and not interfering with the matters of the divine land, then that would be fine. But if you want to be the retired emperor of this divine land, I will not tolerate you. The king of the underworld said indifferently, all words and rhetoric, all attempts to whitewash peace are useless. This is the true nature of the matter. Silently, Yin Namlai said, regardless of whether it is you or the other human sovereigns, the ultimate goal of seeking the throne is to resist the demon race and protect our divine land. It is not for your own selfish desires. This is the prerequisite for everything. Our temple has no intention of interfering with the actions of the human sovereigns, but the prerequisite is that the human sovereigns themselves are virtuous and care for the common people. Reduce internal friction, resist the demon race together, and protect the divine land. This is the main prerequisite for everything. Lin Feng, Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and the others did not speak after hearing this. After seeing Wen Qiang's memories, they already knew that in ancient times, the Taishu Temple had already had its initial differences regarding the policy. At that time, there had already been the initial split between the radical and conservative factions. However, the radical and conservative factions of that time were not the same concepts as they were now. In ancient times, the conservative faction of the Taishu Temple was led by Wen Qiyang. They were inclined to focus on resisting the demon race and protecting the divine land. As for the rule of the human sovereigns, they mainly observed and supervised them. At that time, the radical faction was inclined to choose the human sovereigns to ensure that the human sovereigns could cooperate closely with the Taishu Temple to resist the demon race together. The leader of this faction was Wen Qiang's junior brother, the second abbot of the Taishu Temple, Yin Xinghe. The cause of the dispute between the two sides had actually sprouted when the Taishu Taoist was still alive. It originated from the first human sovereign of the ancient era, Tai Huang. Although he fought side by side with the Taishu Taoist, he was not close to the Taishu Temple. Instead, they were even distant from the Taishu Temple. There were many private frictions between the subordinates of the Tai Huang and the disciples of the Taishu Temple. After that, the situation of the second human sovereign of the ancient era, ruling, was slightly better. However, when it came to the third human sovereign, Astro's sovereign, he gradually became distant from the Taishu Temple. At that point, the radical faction of the ancient era within the Taishu Temple grew stronger and stronger, and finally took shape. A mocking smile appeared on the face of the king of the underworld. Exactly the same argument as Yin Xinghe. In order to prevent a human sovereign like me from opposing you and causing internal friction, it's best to choose a human sovereign who is in line with your wishes to be your protector and watch over the divine land. Caring for the common people and protecting the divine land. Are you really so selfless? Silently, the king of the underworld said, "In my opinion, even the Taishu Taoist might not be like that." He looked at Yin Nan Lai, Dao Master Ching Yi, and the others. Have you never thought about why Taishu Tian and Taoist Tianshan are at odds with the Taishu Temple? Even Taoist Rulai is at loggerheads with you? Yin Nan Lai and the others frowned slightly. Taishu Tian was the original name of the Tai sovereign. Taoist Tianshan was the name of the Astro sovereign before he ascended to the throne, and Taoist Rulai and Gautama Buddha were the names of the Tai sovereign after he ascended to the throne. The king of the underworld tilted his head slightly. Taishu Tian? Indeed, he is of noble character and unquestionable integrity. However, looking at the history, do you know what I see? What I see is that the Taishu Taoist and Taishu Tian were equally matched in the last years of the ancient era. However, after entering the ancient era, the Taishu Taoist who obtained the Haotian Mirror and occupied White Cloud Mountain started to gradually surpass Taishu Tian. What I see is that after the battle with the first Dragon Absolute, Taishu Tian, who ascended to the position of the Supreme Human Emperor, died, while the Taishu Taoist who had the Haotian Mirror in his hand survived. What I see is that during the war between the two worlds, Taoist Tianshan, who ascended to the position of the Human Emperor, died, and after the Taishu Taoist and Taoist Rely went to the Sea of Death, the Haotian Mirror finally recovered and saved Yin Xinghe's life. The king of the underworld said slowly, "Back then, the Taishu Taoist and Taishu Tian saw the birth of the Haotian Mirror at the same time. With Taishu Tian's personality, I don't believe that he would take the initiative to give it up. The Tai sovereign was a man of great talent and strategy, but his domineering majesty was also known throughout the ages. I don't know the details of how the Taishu Taoist obtained the Haotian Mirror, and I don't have the heart to criticize him. After all, it was his ability to obtain it." The king of the underworld said calmly, "It's just that looking at history, I've learned a lesson. Absolute power is the foundation of everything. If it wasn't for the Haotian Mirror protecting the fate of your Taishu Temple generation after generation, how much better would your fate be compared to the Heavenly Gates, the primitive devil cult, and the Great Thunderclap Temple?" As the king of the underworld said this, he looked at Lin Feng and said with a smile, "If it wasn't for the celestial punishing sword forged by the master of the Celestial Gate after the Battle of Mount Shu, I'm afraid you guys wouldn't have been able to live in peace with him, right?" Yin Nan Lai, Dao Master Ching Yi, Dao Master Ching Ning, Wu Mengqi, and the others all frowned slightly. When Lin Feng heard this, he smiled faintly and didn't say anything. The king of the underworld continued, "If it wasn't for the Haotian Mirror, it would still be a matter of doubt as to who White Cloud Mountain belonged to back then. The White Cloud Mountain in ancient times wasn't like it is today. It was the center where the spiritual chi of the entire divine land converged. It was only at the end of the ancient times that the chi of the vast thousand worlds gradually declined due to the changes in the chi of the entire world. Although the Starry Sea is good compared to the White Cloud Mountain of that time, in terms of daily cultivation, it can't be compared." The king of the underworld shook his head repeatedly. The best Dharma treasure isn't in one's hands, and the most suitable blessed land and heavenly abode for cultivation isn't in one's hands. Most of the time, one isn't the number one in the divine continent in name and in reality. What's the point of being a human emperor like this? I've ascended to the throne, and I don't want to live in the shadows of others. much less be a marionette or a puppet in front of the stage. Yin Nanlai said faintly. Those who harbor darkness in their hearts see the entire world as devoid of light. No matter how much you say, you can't change the fact that you're not upright. It's not that I want to depose you alone, but the entire divine land can't tolerate your perverse actions. What you said just now is to gloss over your mistakes and argue back with sophistry. When the king of the underworld heard this, he didn't get angry. A faint smile appeared on his handsome face. Oh, is that so? Xiao Fangyu, this is a human emperor that you're satisfied with, right? Silently, Yin Nanlai said, although we've always had our suspicions, with the reappearance of Ding of Shenzhou, we've finally confirmed that this is yet another sin you've committed. The king of the underworld said indifferently, Sin? From what I see, in your entire Taishu temple, from the ancient times to the present, if there's someone who can live up to what you preach, it might be hard to say for others, but there's at least one person who definitely fits the bill. He pointed to his feet. That person is Wen Qiyang, who ultimately died here. He doesn't want to be human emperor. He doesn't want to be the abbot of Taishu Temple. He doesn't want to control the Haotian mirror either. Slowly, the king of the underworld said, but the number of top-notch great demons he has killed is probably more than Taoist Tian Shan, Xia Fangyu, and Yin Xinghe combined. He clearly had powers that far surpassed Yin Xinghe. But in the end, in order to avoid internal strife in Taishu Temple, he left for another place. This person can be said to be true to his words and deeds. But what happened to this person? He couldn't even protect his precious wife and child. The king of the underworld's expression was filled with mockery. That's right, I killed Xiao Fangyu. But before that, what was Xiao Fangyu doing? After Wen Qiyang and the Divine Abyss Extreme Spirit were both heavily injured, and after Wen Qiyang was suspected to have died, he went to assassinate Wen Qiyang's wife, Yun Yao, to avenge her only son. But unexpectedly, in order to take care of Yun Yao, who was pregnant, Wen Qiyang left a protective spell on her body. Even if Wen Qiyang died, it would still be effective. In the end, the two sides engaged in a great battle. The foreign dimension where Wen Qiyang and his wife lived in seclusion collapsed and was destroyed. Xiao Fangyu killed the Cloud Demon, but he was also injured by the Cloud Demon and Wen Qiyang's dermic powers. The king of the underworld raised his head and laughed. Poor Yun Yao, with Wen Qiyang's spell, had a chance to escape. But who knew that her fetus would be affected, and she would give birth prematurely. In the end, she used the remaining power of the spell to send the baby away, but she died at Xiao Fangyu's hands. How laughable! Wen Qiyang risked his life in battle, but in the end his wife died at the hands of the same race that he had protected all his life. And his son's whereabouts are unknown. Who knows where he is, and whether he is dead or alive? In the red, chaotic void, only the king of the underworld's laughter echoed, sending chills down one's spine. Chapter 1097. Lin Feng calmly glanced at the people in the Taishu Temple. As expected, you already knew about this. No wonder Shoichi Dashin and Xianlin Taoist weren't surprised when they saw Ding of Shenzhou reprimanding them. And they weren't surprised when Xia Huang was injured when he was killed by this person. The corners of the underworld emperor's mouth curled up to reveal a mocking smile. Of course they know that the foreign space where Wen Qiyang lives in seclusion is extremely well hidden, and he and Yun Yao have always lived in seclusion. Xiao Fangyu couldn't find that place by himself. So, how did Xiao Fangyu know the exact location of that foreign space? The Haotian mirror. Only the Haotian mirror. The king of the underworld smiled. Speaking of which, I have to thank Xia Fangyu. It was because he found the alternate dimension where Wen Qiyang lived with the help of the Haotian mirror. That reminded me not to underestimate the searching ability of the Haotian mirror. So, when I set up the foundation of the Underworld Hall, I took the trouble to find a medium-class world that was only connected to the void battlefield. Dao Master Qing, Yi's indifferent gaze gradually turned cold. The king of the underworld glanced at her, shook his head, and sneered. What? Do you need me to find a witness for you? He pointed his finger, and rays of gray light condensed in the void, turning into a half-black, half-white netherworld fruit of life and death. The black half of the Tao fruit flashed, and a figure gradually appeared. It was a middle-aged man dressed in black. He gave off a calm and steady feeling, like a vast and boundless sea or a vast and boundless land. His figure appeared from the black half of the fruit of life, and in the next moment, he moved to the white half. When he reached the white half, the figure of the middle-aged man suddenly turned from illusory to real. Lin Feng looked at the middle-aged man and nodded slightly. Xia Huang. Although he was different from the image of light and shadow that was commonly circulated, without the black dragon robe and flat crown, everyone present could recognize that this middle-aged man was one of the Run Huang of the ancient times, Xia Huang, Xia Fangyu. Lin Feng could clearly feel that ding of Shenzhou in the yin and yang life and death formation shook violently after the middle-aged man showed up. Previously, when facing the king of the underworld, Ding of Shenzhou had also exploded with intense hostility, far more than when facing Tian Yi, Shoichi Daishin, and Xiaoyan. However, this wave of tremors was even more intense. Yin Nan Lai, Dao, Master Qing Yi, and the others looked at Xia Huang, who had turned into an evil soul, and sighed. After knowing that Xia Huang had been assassinated by the king of the underworld and had died at his hands, both Lin Feng and the people of Taishu Temple were mentally prepared. It was very likely that Xia Huang had suffered the same fate as the heavenly spirit elder and the others, that he had been refined by the king of the underworld into an evil soul and imprisoned as his puppet. The king of the underworld said lightly, "To be fair, Xia Fangyu's strength is not bad, and he is one of my proudest collections. It is also because of his strength that I can only drive him to fight against others, but I cannot control his thoughts. However, it is not difficult to read his past memories." Speaking of this, the king of the underworld smiled leisurely. "Moreover, now that you have obtained Ding of Shenzhou, you should know that I have been watching Xia Fangyu for a long time. Before I killed him, I already knew him very well, even more than you people of Taishu Temple." Emperor Xia, who appeared in front of everyone, had a wooden expression on his face. His face was ashen, but as he stood in the space created by heavenly calamity and sensed the mana and aura left behind by Wen Qiyang in the past, his eyes moved slightly, and a complicated glow appeared in them. Oh, I forgot to mention that the reason why he looks so sorrowful now is because I told him what happened to his clansmen. The king of the underworld said lightly, "He has no more worries now. If he can walk out of this state of despair, he might be able to take another step forward. However, he does not seem to have any desire or thoughts in this regard." The king of the underworld stood up and walked to Xia Huang's side. He patted his shoulder casually and said indifferently, "I do not know if Yun Yao wants to kill him to avenge his sisters, but he has always remembered the murder of his son. However, as long as Wen Qiyang is alive, he will not be able to get what he wants." Finally, when Wen Qiyang died fighting the extreme spirit of the divine abyss, even if he cannot be completely sure whether he is dead or alive, just the fact that his life lamp was extinguished in White Cloud Mountain made him unable to hold back. The king of the underworld returned to his black dragon throne and laughed. How laughable! Wen Qiyang died fighting for the divine land. Before his body had even turned cold, he was sold by his own Hao Ian mirror, and his wife and son were killed by his own clansmen. If not for Wen Qiyang leaving behind a powerful Dharma power restriction that could be used even after his death, the result would be Yun Yao and his wife. Xia Fangyu thought that since Yun Yao was pregnant, it would not be difficult to kill him. He could deal with the extreme spirit of the divine abyss after killing Yun Yao. However, he did not expect to be heavily injured after killing Yun Yao. He let extreme spirit of the divine abyss escape back to infinite wasteland for nothing, hiding his tracks and disappearing without a trace. The king of the underworld shook his head slightly and looked at Yin Nan Lai and the rest with a mocking expression. "This is the emperor that you all worship? This is not the most laughable part." The king of the underworld laughed and said, "What do you think is the most laughable part of this?" It is right here. He pointed at the red, chaotic space that everyone was in and said, after so many years, extreme spirit of the divine abyss recovered from his injuries and made a comeback. Who was the one who ended him? Who was the one who was responsible for Yin Xinghe and Xia Fengyu's actions back then? It was none other than Wen Qiyang, whose wife and son were killed by them. The king of the underworld laughed and sighed. It is laughable that Wen Qiyang died for nothing again. His gaze swept across Yin Nanlai and Lin Feng. What I am more interested in is, does Wen Qiyang know anything about what happened after that? Lin Feng's expression was calm. With a flick of his finger, a light image appeared in the void. It was Wen Qiyang's experience after he entered the Netherworld Sea. The light image flashed quickly. Yin Nanlai, Dao Master Qing Yi, Dao Master Qing Ning, and Wu Mengxi did not say a word, their expression solemn. After the light image finished, it finally stopped at the moment when Wen Qiyang completely merged with the heavenly adversity and guided the Netherworld Sea to rush to the divine prefecture. Lin Feng said indifferently, making a move at that point in time for him, regardless of victory or defeat, it was a situation of certain death, and his choice was to courageously meet death. Only he didn't know that other than bleeding, he also had a cry. The king of the underworld was also slightly stunned. After a while, he shook his head and laughed. Not knowing the truth, from a certain point of view, is actually a kind of happiness for him. But more than that, it is also a kind of sorrow. He looked at Yin Nanlai and said indifferently, fellow disciples of the same sect for tens of thousands of years. Just because of differences of opinion? Since he was young, he passed on his skills on behalf of his master and personally nurtured him. It was this junior brother that he trusted greatly who sold his family. The king of the underworld raised his head slightly and looked at the red, chaotic void. This is the first time I've wanted to revive an enemy so much. Unfortunately, he has already been completely destroyed in both body and soul. Otherwise, I would really like to ask him, how would he feel when he saw this scene? The king of the underworld looked at Yin Nanlai and slowly asked, other than Xia Fengyu dying by my hands, and Wen Qiyang's experience after he entered the Netherworld Sea, you should all be very clear about everything else from the ancient era to the present. I really want to know, do you still hold Xia Fengyu in such high regard? Yin Nanlai was silent. After a while, he said slowly, everything about Xia Huang is good, and he can be considered a wise ruler. However, his only problem is that he values personal relationships too much. Even my ancestors did not expect that he would first seek trouble with Yun Yao, and that he would ultimately go to the divine abyss. Xiao Yin snorted coldly. In other words, the fault is all on Xia Huang, and it has nothing to do with you? So as long as you don't personally stain yourself with blood, the matter of someone stabbing you in the back will have nothing to do with you? Yin Nanlai said in a deep voice, founding Master Scarlet's son was loyal and courageous, and his contributions will last for thousands of years. He could be said to be a role model for our generation. From a personal point of view, I also find it hard to accept what happened to him. However, from a rational point of view, I will make the same decision as my ancestors. Yin Nanlai's expression was heavy. Yun Yao is, after all, a member of the Yao race. As long as founding Master Scarlet's son is still alive, she will not become an enemy of the human race. However, after founding Master Scarlet's son passes away, she will still have a grudge against Xia Huang. The conflict between the two of them will very likely intensify. No matter what, Xia Huang is a pillar of the human race. Whether it is our temple or the others in the divine land, we must all support Xia Huang. Yin Yao is powerless to fight against the entire divine land. If she wants revenge, she must join the Yao race. She herself is a great Yao with extraordinary strength. No one knows if founding Master Scarlet's son told her some of the secrets of the human race or important information of our temple after she married him. If she joins the Yao race, the result will be hard to predict. Yin Nanlai closed his eyes slightly. No one could see the shame in the depths of his eyes. There was only a face of unswerving determination. Although I have let down founding Master Scarlet's son, Yun Yao cannot be left alive. The safety of the divine land is above all else. Yun Yao is an absolutely unstable factor and could even be a hostile factor. The king of the underworld sneered, "So, when Qiyang trusts your ancestor Yin Xinghe, but from Yin Xinghe until now, you have never trusted Wen Qiyang? Even we know that although Wen Qiyang is unbridled, he has always been bound by his sense of responsibility towards the divine land and your Taishu temple. For such a person, how could he not know what kind of hidden dangers there would be if he were to pass crucial secret information to Yun Yao? Back then, if Wen Qiyang had not left White Cloud Mountain of his own accord to avoid internal strife in your Taishu temple and reduce the power of the Yao race, other than the Taishu Taoist, who else could have let him go?" Yin Nanlai and the others were silent. After a while, Yin Nanlai shook his head. Ancestor did not want to take the risk. "This is the funniest thing we have heard today." The king of the underworld laughed. "On one hand, you enjoy the protection of Wen Qiyang's sense of responsibility and power, but on the other hand, you are rejecting and doubting him." The king of the underworld sat on the black dragon throne and knocked on the armrest. "And what is interesting is that your ancestor Yin Xinghe trusted Xia Fangyu more than he trusted his own senior brother Wen Qiyang. But in the end, Xia Fangyu chose to first take revenge for a personal grudge, to the extent that he let extreme spirit of the divine abyss escape. In the end, Wen Qiyang, the person you all betrayed, had to turn the tide and die again." Chapter 1098. The king of the underworld looked at Yin Nanlai mockingly and said calmly, "Loyal, courageous, and a role model? Are you saying nice things, or do you only speak for yourself?" Now, among the 4 ancient heroes of Taishu Temple, the most famous one is Yin Xinghe. He is the pillar of Taishu Temple and supports the divine continent. Back then, he perished together with me and forced me to abdicate. He inherited the will of the Taishu Taoist and is the most legitimate successor of Taishu Temple. But in the era that I lived in, when Taishu Temple is mentioned, the first person that comes to everyone's mind would never be the temple master, but Wen Qiyang. It's just like how when the strongest humans in the divine land are mentioned, no one would ever think of Taoist Tianshan or Xia Fangyu. Instead, they would think of Wen Qiyang first. The king of the underworld shook his head. "Although I have only been truly resurrected in recent years, the news has not been blocked for so many years. It seems that regardless of whether it is internally or externally, the Taishu Temple has always treated this loyal and courageous Grandmaster Qiyang as a role model. You have always kept it a secret and downplayed it, haven't you? Other than his outstanding strength, which is publicly acknowledged and can never be changed in your eyes, his entire life is probably more of a stain, right?" The corners of the underworld emperor's mouth revealed a faint smile. "Let this emperor guess what you think of Wen Qiyang. In your eyes, Wen Qiyang should never have fallen in love with Yun Yao. Otherwise, he would not have suffered such a tragedy in the future. In your eyes, when conflict arose between his wife and Xia Huang, Wen Qiyang should have decisively divorced his wife, or even killed her. The way you see it, if it weren't for the fact that Wen Qiyang left behind a spell to protect the pregnant Cloud Yao, the Xia Emperor would have been able to easily kill the Cloud Yao, and then he would still be able to deal with the divine abyss of extreme spirituality." The king of the underworld smiled. "So, you're not wrong, and the fault lies entirely with Wen Qiyang?" A gloominess flashed past Yin Nanlai's eyes. From the beginning of history until now, among those within the Taishu Temple who knew the details of history, this was the mainstream view of Wen Qiyang. The king of the underworld laughed. "In my eyes, there's only one reason why Wen Qiyang ended up in such a pathetic and laughable state. He is too powerful, but he does not realize it. The people who live under his shadow are not only Taoist Tianshan and Xia Fangyu. There is another person who has always been covered by a shadow. It is the second-generation head of the Void Temple, Yin Xinghe, whom he brought up since he was young and became his senior and junior brother for over 10,000 years. Wen Qiyang has never interfered with the internal affairs of the human emperor. Although he has disagreements with Yin Qingwu on the general policy, he has never used his own strength to make arbitrary decisions. This does not affect Yin Qingwu's management and leadership of the internal affairs of Taishu Temple. His eyes are always on infinite wasteland. In his heart, his comrades and compatriots are behind him. However, he would never have thought that in the eyes of those who hide behind him, he is actually more like a powerful artifact like the Haotian mirror. However, unlike the Haotian mirror, when he loses his power and value, what is left is not pity, but disgust and disgust. Perhaps in the eyes of some people, if only Wen Qiyang could drag the divine Abyss Lingji to perish together with him in the ancient war, that would be the perfect ending. The king of the underworld revealed a mocking smile. However, the final outcome is not bad. As long as Xia Fangyu could kill the heavily injured divine Abyss Lingji, the outcome would still be perfect. Therefore, after Wen Qiang's destiny lamp extinguished, Xia Fangyu came looking for him. Yan Xinghe also had no qualms about helping Xia Fangyu find out where Wen Qiang was living in seclusion. However, it is a pity that Yan Xinghe did not understand Wen Qiang and Xia Fangyu well enough. He miscalculated Xia Fangyu's determination to avenge his son's death and underestimated the fact that Wen Qiang had left a protective dermic power restriction on Yun Yao. Yin Nanlai said silently, "Not everyone is like you, only thinking about themselves." The king of the underworld laughed softly. At the very least, Xia Fangyu is like me. In front of him, the evil soul of Xia Huang was expressionless. However, its eyes were filled with desolation. Looking at the evil soul of Xia Huang, Yin Nanlai, Dao Lord Qing Yi, Dao Lord Qing Ning, Wu Mengqi, and the others all sighed. Thank you, king of the underworld, for sharing some of the secrets of that era. However, I have a question. Lin Feng suddenly clapped his hands and said. The king of the underworld looked at him. Master Xianmin, feel free to speak. Lin Feng said indifferently. Xia Huang indulged his clansmen and covered up for his son's wrongdoings. This was a personal sin, but merits are merits and demerits are demerits. During his ascension to the throne, he contributed to the divine land. The grudge with Wen Qiang and his wife was also a personal grudge. However, this personal grudge led to another incident, which was that he abandoned his official duties for personal reasons and allowed Ji Huang Xinyuan to escape. As a result, he left behind a huge threat for the divine land. Just as the king of the underworld said, the most laughable thing about this incident is that the person who helped him clean up the mess and shoulder the responsibility was Wen Qiang, whose wife and son he slaughtered. What's even more laughable is that Wen Qiang originally controlled the Netherworld Sea. If it wasn't for the battle with Ji Huang Xinyuan, he actually wouldn't have had to die and would have had the chance to return to the vast thousand domains. Lin Feng said calmly. Of course, if that was the case, it's hard to say what would have happened when he returned. Yin Nanlai, Dao Lord Qing Yi, and the others all looked somewhat gloomy. However, Lin Feng then changed the topic. But that's not my question. My question is, when Xia Huang abandoned his official duties for personal reasons and allowed Ji Huang Xinyuan to escape, what were you doing, king of the underworld? Lin Feng looked at the king of the underworld and lightly slapped his forehead. Oh, that's right. You were tailing Xia Huang and killed him. The king of the underworld's expression was calm as he met Lin Feng's gaze. Lin Feng said calmly, "Through Ding of Shenzhou, I can clearly tell that your excellency's magical powers had already surpassed Xia Huang's at that time. Although your excellency did not possess a creation treasure at that time, your excellency's battle prowess was strong enough. You might not have been able to kill the heavily injured Ji Huang Xinyuan, but at the very least, you had a chance. While it's true that Xia Huang was lacking in personal morals and integrity, making it difficult for him to be called a proper ruler, your excellency is the same. Between your personal interests and the justice of the divine prefecture, you chose the former. Not to mention, after you ascended the throne, you intended to build the netherworld and enslave the dead. This is something that no one would agree to. Lin Feng placed his hands behind his back and said unhurriedly, "What happened to Xia Huang has nothing to do with Your Excellency being deposed in the future." The king of the underworld's expression was similarly indifferent as he smiled faintly. The winner takes all. There's no need to say anything else. Lin Feng tilted his head slightly as a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Oh, not necessarily, right? You only have yourself to blame for a lot of things. Xia Huang sacrificed his duties for personal reasons and let Ji Huang Xinyuan go. Even if Yin Xinghe supported him in the beginning and the two of them got along well, there would definitely be a rift between the two of them in the future. This has nothing to do with Yin Xinghe's moral character, but it stemmed from the fact that there will be endless troubles in the future. Xia Huang was lacking in morals, and his clansmen caused the entire divine land to be filled with complaints. If Your Excellency can successfully kill Ji Huang Xinyuan, then your reputation will definitely far surpass Xia Huang's. Even if it's not as good as when Qiang's, it won't be too far off. Your personal strength is already above Xia Huang's." If the scandal of Xia Huang sacrificing his duties for personal reasons were to spread, it would be hard to say who the human emperor would belong to in the future. Lin Feng glanced at Yin Nanlai and the others and shook his head with a smile. "From what I know, Your Excellency had a good relationship with Taishu Temple before you ascended the throne, and it's not much worse than Xia Huang's. As for the future troubles of Xia Huang's survival, can this future trouble be greater than Ji Huang Xinyuan's? It's true that you were deposed and overthrown later on, but I believe that Your Excellency definitely wants to sit on the throne for eternity. You want to sit on the human emperor's seat forever. As long as Ji Huang Xinyuan doesn't die, there will come a day when you have to face him again. After all, at that time, no one knew that when Qiang, whose natal lamp had been extinguished, would one day return to the divine land." The king of the underworld was expressionless. After a while, the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. "History cannot repeat itself. What you said is not absolutely certain. However, in the long years that followed, I would sometimes think about it. If I had chosen a different method back then, what would the situation be like?" Lin Feng also smiled. "The choice you made on how to ascend to the throne is in line with your own style of doing things. You're used to hiding your head and showing your tail, so you will always, intentionally or unintentionally, ignore the open and honorable way of doing things. It's not that you really didn't think of it, but you habitually ignored these choices. However, to be honest, you used your own method to successfully ascend to the throne, and you also sat on the peaceful throne for a long time. However, as long as you don't change your original intention and try to control the cycle of life and death, even if you step on Ji Huang Xinyuan's corpse to ascend to the throne, your final outcome as the human emperor will not change." After Lin Feng finished speaking, he no longer looked at the king of the underworld. His gaze turned to Yin Nanlai, Dao Master Qing Yi, and the others. As for the relationship between Dao Master Scarlet Sun and the second-generation Temple Master Yin Xinghe, forgive me for using a common slang used by mortals to describe it. When Qiang's sincerity was all fed to the dogs in the end, the expressions of everyone in Taishu Temple suddenly changed. Even the usually calm Yin Nanlai's expression changed slightly at this moment. Dao Master Qing Ning even shouted angrily, "What did you say?" Lin Feng looked at him calmly. "I'm not used to repeating myself twice. If you really want me to repeat myself, that's fine. Stand closer." Pointing to the front, Lin Feng said indifferently, "If you want to question me, don't stand so far away. Stand here." Dao Master Qing Ning was stunned. Lin Feng no longer paid attention to him. He looked around and said indifferently, "Previously, I showed everyone the memories of when Qiang after he entered the Netherworld Sea. Now, I'm showing him the memories of the second, last battle of his life before he entered the Netherworld Sea." Finishing speaking, Lin Feng lightly flicked his finger and a shadow appeared in the void. It was the scene of when Qiang rushing to the aid of White Cloud Mountain during the war between the two worlds in ancient times, the scene of the great battle against the extreme emperor's divine abyss. Wen Qiyang sensed the power of the extreme King Divine Abyss, and he had a foreboding of his own fate. But he wasn't afraid. I have to kill this demon. Otherwise, the dark times of the archaic epoch will return. Wen Qiang looked at Yin Xinghe in front of him. Xinghe, I need the help of the Haotian mirror this time. Even if I die, I'm confident that the Divine Abyss will be gravely injured. At that time, I need you and Xia Fangyu to kill it completely. Yin Xinghe nodded. I'll control the Supreme Void Yin-Yang formation, and Xia Fangyu will refine the new Ding of Shenzhou. We will not let this monkey return to infinite wilderness alive. Wen Qiyang was silent for a moment. Xinghe, I know you've always been prejudiced against Yin. However, she's not an enemy of the Divine Land. Now that she's pregnant and about to become a mother, our child will become the most important thing to her, not hatred. If anything happens to me, I don't ask you to take care of them. I just hope that you can keep silent and not make things difficult for them. This is my only concern. Chapter 1099. Wen Qiang looked at Yin Xinghe earnestly, but Yin Xinghe remained silent in the projection, not saying a word. Time was running out, and Wen Qiang's gaze became slightly anxious. Yin Xinghe's deep voice finally rang out. As long as they do not harm the Divine Land, the entire temple will not make things difficult for them. A smile appeared on Wen Qiang's face. Thank you, Xinghe. Seeing the smile again, Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and the rest lowered their heads slightly. That smile was the same as the one Wen Qiang had when he faced death for the second time in the Netherworld Sea and fought Jihuang Xinyuan. The Divine Land's deserts, lonely mountains, rivers, lakes, and seas, they all know that I have been back. The powerful words were still ringing in their ears, and the smile was the same. Amidst the heroic spirit, there was a hint of childlike naivety and joy. At this moment, in the projection, Wen Qiang was smiling as he looked at the faintly discernible giant white ape in the dark clouds that covered the sky. He looked up to the sky and roared, Divine Abyss, Extreme Spirit Xiao Kuang, come and fight. Amidst the roar, Wen Qiang's body turned into a white light and soared into the sky. He was like a long rainbow that could split the boundless universe, directly tearing apart the dark clouds and demonic aura. A bright mirror's radiance accompanied him as he rose up to meet the giant white ape in the void. An unprecedented battle unfolded just like that. The final outcome was known to everyone present, but the conversation before the battle was only between Wen Qiang and Yin Xinghe, the two brothers. Yin Nanlai's face was pale. Dao Masters Qing Yi, Qing Ning, and Wu Mengqi also had ugly expressions. Even Dao Master Qing Yi, who had always been cold and unyielding, raised his head slightly and closed his eyes. He did not speak for a long time. Lin Feng's calm voice echoed in the chaotic red void. The one who did it was Xia Huang. The entire Taishu temple really did not participate in it. However, do you feel at ease if your hands are not stained with blood? Or do you think that this is already a reward for Wen Qiang? Everyone knows what Wen Qiang meant by not making things difficult. The place where he and his wife live in seclusion can only be found by the Haotian mirror. I don't believe that someone like Yin Xinghe would misunderstand it. Lin Feng lightly said, so? Was it to prevent Wen Qiang from holding back because he couldn't get the promise? Or perhaps he knew that Wen Qiang was going to die, so he gave him psychological comfort so that he could go on his way in peace? Or could it be that after Wen Qiang died in battle and Yin Xinghe was severely injured, Xia Huang threatened the Taishu temple not to pursue Jihuang Xinyuan if they did not tell them Yun Yao's whereabouts? Or perhaps he felt that since Wen Qiang was already dead, telling Xia Huang the whereabouts of Yun Yao would strengthen the relationship between the two of them. It could also be considered as maximizing the value of Wen Qiang after his death. Or perhaps he kept telling himself that I was doing this for senior brother Wen's own good, to help him deal with the aftermath and cover up the scandal of this temple. Lin Feng chuckled, but his smile was slightly cold. Haha, there are many similar reasons, and I can find many more. However, none of them can change one fact. When Qiang treated people with sincerity, but the person he entrusted to him betrayed this wholehearted trust. Lin Feng looked up at the chaotic red void in front of him. Right now, I really want to know what Wen Qiang would think if he were to come back to life. Slowly, after a moment of silence, Yin Namlai opened his mouth and said, I will not comment on the actions of my ancestor. Since I have already done something, I am prepared to take responsibility for it. If Ancestor Scarlet Sun were to really come back to life, it is normal for him to make things difficult for this temple. This temple can only accept it. Lin Feng smiled slightly. You are so sure that Wen Qiang will not take revenge wantonly. Haha, I am really starting to suspect that Yin Xinghe has the same thoughts. Perhaps he knows his senior brother better than we do? Lin Feng's smile turned cold. So he is becoming more and more unbridled? That better not be the case. Otherwise, he is even more deserving of death. Yin Namlai was silent. Dao Master Qing Yi, Dao Master Qing Ning, and Wu Mengqi all had ugly expressions. Lin Feng's expression was calm. He brushed his sleeves and clasped his palms together. We have chatted for long enough. Your two sects are almost ready, right? Behind him, the red light in Xiao Yan's eyes flickered violently. He also formed a hand seal with his hands. Then, a huge, evil, radiant overlord sword appeared in front of him. Xiao Yan's hand grabbed the hilt of the evil, radiant overlord sword, pointing it straight into the air. He saw that door-like wide, unsharpened blade gradually disappear in the red, chaotic space, as if using a sword to stab into the space. The king of the underworld suddenly stood up from the black dragon throne. The dragon throne turned into a black light and disappeared. A red light appeared on his palm as he gradually reached into the void. Master of the celestial sect of wonders, this disciple of yours actually has such a close relationship with the Netherworld Sea. He can be said to be the #1 person under Wen Qiang. Wu Mengqi, who was behind Yin Namlai, frowned. He formed a hand seal with his palms, and the calamity of the Netherworld Sea flashed frequently in his eyes. Xiao Yan's evil radiant overlord sword and the king of the underworld's right hand that was reaching into the void suddenly slowed down. The king of the underworld smiled slightly. You have merely obtained Wen Qiang's legacy. You are still far from understanding the Netherworld Sea. You are unable to resonate with heavenly misfortune. At most, you can only use the power of the Netherworld Sea to disrupt the changes in the spiritual qi in the Netherworld Sea to obstruct me and that young friend Xiao Yan. You have no chance to control heavenly misfortune in the Netherworld Sea. The king of the underworld glanced at Lin Feng. If you join forces with the master of the celestial sect of wonders to deal with me, you will only be helping him. Dao Master Qing, he said indifferently. Oh, you think so? She raised one of her palms. Suddenly, a dazzling circle of light that was difficult to grasp appeared on her palm and circled around her wrist. These circles of light flew up from her wrist and landed on Wu Mengqi's body. Wu Mengqi's body was enveloped in a dazzling light. The light suddenly trembled and gradually began to turn into a red light, similar to heavenly misfortune. The king of the underworld was slightly surprised. This remarkable technique is quite interesting. It seems to be a mutation of the universal void mystic light. It gave up some of its effects in exchange for enhancing other effects to a new level. It even faintly triggered some new changes. Although he was surprised, the king of the underworld still had a relaxed expression. However, when Lin Feng began to walk towards him step by step, surrounded by rainbow light, the king of the underworld could no longer maintain his relaxed expression. Why you look so surprised? Lin Feng said calmly. I should have already said that no matter what the ownership of the Netherworld Sea and heavenly misfortune is in the future, we will definitely inform you first. What happened before will not affect this decision. Let's deal with you first. I will slowly talk to the fellow Taoists from Taishu Temple. The king of the underworld shook his head and laughed. Xianmen sect leader, you're a person with very good ideas. However, I wonder what the people from Taishu Temple are planning. There are probably not many people who would belittle Yin Xinghe like you did. Lin Feng said calmly. What he did, I can't say. As for what the fellow Taoists from Taishu Temple want to do, that is their business. As he spoke, a tall figure wearing white scale armor and flashing with four-colored lightning appeared beside Xiaoyan. It was Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone. Tens of thousands of golden rays of light are shining above Xiaoyan's head. Flowers are falling from the sky. A majestic golden bridge also lies beside Xiaoyan. Seeing this, the king of the underworld shook his head. As expected, with your real body here, you are much more threatening than the people from Taishu Temple. Lin Feng did not say anything else. He used Xianmin sect leader's heavenly escape and approached the king of the underworld step by step. Yin Nanlai took a deep breath and said, Marshal Uncle Qing Yi, Senior Brother Qing Ning, please protect Junior Brother Wu. I will go to King of the Underworld. Dao Master Qing Yi looked at Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone and Zhu Yi's Permitha bridge and shook his head. You and Qing Ning stay here. I will go. As soon as he finished speaking, the mysterious light around him flickered. It was unfathomable, indescribable, and mysterious to the extreme. It was the 9 heavens of the Taishu 9 heavens technique, the heavenly Taishu mysterious light. Under the indescribable mysterious light, Dao Master Qing Yi also walked toward the king of the underworld. The king of the underworld's expression did not change. He glanced at Xia Huang's evil soul beside him. Xia Huang, who had appeared from the life and death nether Dao fruit, silently walked toward Lin Feng. At the same time, the king of the underworld tapped his finger lightly. Another life and death nether Dao fruit that was half black and half white appeared. The black half of the Dao fruit flashed with brilliance, and a figure gradually became clear. It was a white-haired old man dressed in a snow-white robe. His face was elegant and thin, but when his eyelids opened and closed, a hair-raising bloody light flashed from time to time. It was a ghastly sight. Lin Feng raised his eyebrows. So Blood River Taoist really died in your hands? Although they had never seen him in person, Lin Feng and the others recognized him at a glance through the historical images. The old man in the white robe with bloody eyes in front of them was a giant of the diabolism in ancient times, the founder of the Blood River sect, Taoist Blood River. In the entire history of the Divine Land, he was one of the few experts of the diabolism. In the past, Shu Mountain was flooded with blood, and 480 million blood gods dominated the world. In terms of individual magic power alone, the only person who could surpass him was the human emperor at that time, who was the emperor of the underworld who was in this place. The founder of the Shu Mountain Sword sect, Sword Ancestor Ren Changmei, relied on the absolute home advantage of the Shu Mountain Sword Peak and the great immortal heaven manifestation sword formation to defeat him. If it had been any other place, even with the celestial heaven sword, he might not have been a match for him. It was also because of Blood River Taoist arrogance that he took the initiative to destroy the gate of Shu Mountain. In the end, all 480 million blood gods were killed, and his vitality was greatly damaged. Even his original body was later chased out by Ren Changmei with the celestial heaven sword and injured. At that time, the blood gods that Blood River Taoists practiced were strange and overbearing. As long as the blood gods were not destroyed, his original body would not be destroyed. Before he went to Shu Mountain, he did not bring all the blood gods with him. Instead, he made backup arrangements to ensure his safety. However, he was plotted against. The blood gods that he used as a retreat route were also locked on. Under the influence of the aura, all the blood gods were destroyed by the great immortal heaven manifestation sword formation. However, this old demon was indeed strong. Even so, he still killed many experts of the Shu Mountain Sword sect and broke out of the encirclement. Not long after, he died in another chaotic battle. The person who killed him became a mystery, but it was another unsolved case. However, there were many rumors in later generations that the person who schemed against Blood River Taoist and killed him was probably the king of the underworld. Now it seems that the rumors are true. Lin Feng's expression was calm as he sized up Blood River Taoist, who had also become an evil soul. Chapter 1100. Lin Feng looked at the king of the underworld and Blood River Taoist with interest. The strength of the person who has been refined into an evil soul by you is more or less lacking compared to when he was alive. Not to mention that the reason why Blood River Taoist was so powerful back then was mainly because of his blood god's magical power. It was strange, overbearing, and mysterious. But after losing the 480 million blood gods that he had painstakingly refined for his entire life, it's really hard to say how much strength Blood River Taoist has left in his heyday. You have been planning to be reborn all these years, and after that you have been living in seclusion. I'm afraid you have no way to find enough living beings to help Blood River Taoist recultivate the blood god, right? The king of the underworld said calmly. It's enough to deal with this little girl from the Taishu temple. After saying that, Blood River Taoist's figure appeared from the black half of the Tao fruit and immediately moved to the white half. When he reached the white half, Blood River Taoist's figure began to become real. He walked out of the Tao fruit and stared at Tao Master Qing expressionlessly. Blood clouds suddenly appeared above his head, covering the sky and covering the sun. Even in this red, chaotic void that made people lose their sense of spatial distance, they could still vaguely feel its vast and boundless strength, as if it made people have a sense of spatial distance again. The blood clouds suddenly split, and the thick and smelly nether blood river began to flow down continuously. Along with the blood rivers, a large amount of blood river true water also dripped down, as if a sky full of blood rain had fallen. Being stained by this almost endless blood, even the mysterious Taishu mysterious light around Tao Master Qing, he seemed to have dimmed a little. Tao Master Qing, he frowned slightly. Under the operation of the Tao law, more and more Taishu mysterious light appeared, and the surroundings seemed to have turned into an untouchable and unapproachable place. Even a majestic blood river true water could only go around, unable to contaminate it. The sky gives birth to water, the sea and the sky are aligned. Tao Master Qing, he said calmly. His right index finger pointed at the surging blood river in front of him, and a water line that seemed to be the source of all water in the world shot out. Although it was only a line, it was like the sharpest blade cutting the blood river in front of him. The nether blood river that had been cut by this water line was actually like a life that had been slain, powerless and unable to continue. The blood river true water, which was used to pollute other people's magic power and break other people's supernatural powers, was actually broken by someone. The scene was really a little scary. However, whether it was Lin Feng or the king of the underworld, none of them was surprised because Tao Master Qing Yi's divine ability of connecting the sea and the sky was cultivated with the heavenly true water, one of the 6 great true water in the world. The king of the underworld smiled. Even without the blood god, if Taoist Blood River only has this much ability, he is not worthy of my attention. While speaking, Taoist Blood River was expressionless. His hands changed hand seals in front of his chest like a blooming lotus. The surging netherworld blood river also drifted away, turning into numerous dark and gloomy blood lotuses, blooming in the air like a sea of flowers. Tao Master Qing, he waved his right hand, and the water line condensed from the heavenly true water meandered around, piercing through dozens of netherworld blood lotuses and connecting them into a string. The water line lightly trembled, and hundreds of blood lotuses shattered together, turning into a rain of blood that fell down. However, after these blood lotuses shattered, there were still hundreds and thousands of them lying in front of him, as if their number was endless. Tao Master Qing Yi's divine ability of connecting the sea and the sky used the heavenly true water as the foundation. Its power was condensed and concentrated, and it could break the blood river true water. However, it was also because of its condensation that even though it was good to deal with the boundless sea of blood, netherworld blood river, and other supernatural powers, when faced with the blossoming of the blood lotuses, instead felt like it was stretched thin. She used the great void mysterious light to protect herself, and had to maintain a very high intensity to be able to withstand the attacks of Taoist blood river. A long battle was disadvantageous to her. On the other side, Xiao Huang's evil soul also met Lin Feng. Xiao Huang's expression was calm. His left hand formed a seal, and his right hand was raised high, slapping down toward Lin Feng's head. In an instant, Lin Feng had a strange feeling, as if he was instantly in boundless darkness, but there seemed to be raging flames flashing in front of him. As the fire lit up, he could vaguely see the vast land of the divine land, surrounded by mountains and rivers. It was as if the entire land of the divine land had turned into a huge cauldron, trapping him inside and roasting and refining him. Heaven and earth were the cauldron, and creation was the work. Yin and yang were the charcoal, and all things were the copper. This was the powerful divine ability that Xiao Huang was famous for in the past, the universal cauldron technique. What especially attracted Lin Feng's attention was that as soon as Xiao Huang used this technique, Ding of Shenzhou, which he was suppressing in the yin and yang life and death formation, actually shook slightly and was about to fly out. Interesting. Lin Feng raised his eyebrows. Even after being refined into an evil soul, it still retains a certain degree of control over its magic treasure when it was alive. If it was a spirit nurturing grade, transformation grade, or Mayana grade magic treasure, then so be it. The current owner's control was far stronger than the original owner's, and the original owner's traces were basically completely erased, and there was no resonance between the original owner and the magic treasure. However, it was different for a creation-grade magic treasure. The mark was almost impossible to erase, unless the original owner dealt with it himself. During the Battle of Extermination, even though Su Anda had personally completed the Book of Life and Death, when the King of the Underworld appeared, the Book of Life and Death still came to him at his beck and call. The King of the Underworld had a backup plan, but his goal was to double his insurance. The original reason was that the Book of Life and Death originally belonged to the King of the Underworld, and it would be extremely difficult for Su Anda to compete with him for control. Apart from the mark left by the owner, the creation-grade magic treasure itself also had quite a bit of autonomy. However, because the creation-grade magic treasure was not a sentient life form that acted completely based on emotions and personal thoughts, although it was hostile towards the King of the Underworld who killed Xiao Huang, it ignored the fact that Xiao Huang had already become an evil soul. Lin Feng glanced at the King of the Underworld. No wonder you let Taoist Blood River fight Dao, Lord Qing, even though you knew that he would be at a disadvantage against the Taishu Temple who possessed the heavenly true water and left Xiao Huang to me. The King of the Underworld said lightly, I've already confirmed it once again. Master of the Celestial Sect of Wonders, you're a slightly greater threat. If Emperor Xia were to take back the Divine Prefecture Cauldron, it would indeed have a positive effect. But you are thinking too simply, Yi Futian said. Lin Feng's left index finger gently touched the space between his eyebrows, and the yin and yang life and death formation was directly unfolded in his vital spirit, completely freezing Ding of Shenzhou and calming its turbulence. The next moment, Lin Feng's right index finger and middle finger stood together like a sword. The chaotic and blurry heaven punishment sword, Qi, turned into a frighteningly sharp sword light and slashed toward the sky. The blazing fire and the pitch-black world in front of him suddenly split, as if the huge furnace of heaven and earth had been split into two halves by Lin Feng's sword. Xiao Huang's wooden expression finally changed a little, revealing a surprised look. What a ferocious sword will, surpassing the evil aura and killing intent of a pure-blooded white tiger. He put his palms together, and suddenly, a green stream of water appeared, instantly turning into a vast ocean, swallowing Lin Feng. It was the lunar true water. This lunar true water seemed to be endless, and in the green stream, there was even a blue luster. Although it was water, it was as heavy as the divine continent, heavier than the countless oceans of the vast thousand world. It was as if the entire vast thousand world had turned into a green ocean, pressing down on Lin Feng, trying to drown him. Lin Feng's eyes flickered slightly, and he opened his palms, and all 49 yin and yang dusk grains spread out. The majestic power of the mustard seed, turning into Mount Meru, burst out, turning into endless light, as if there were real worlds. The 49 light balls, which were like small worlds, forcibly resisted the extremely heavy green ocean. Xia Huang stretched out his left hand, and his 5 fingers closed slightly, as if he wanted to crush something. Under the urging of his left hand, the green ocean became heavier and more condensed, and the flowing water seemed to turn solid, like a piece of amber, tightly locking Lin Feng in it. The great power tried to crush Lin Feng and the world formed by the yin and yang dust grains. He stretched out his right hand, with his index finger, middle finger, and ring finger together, and his thumb and little finger curled up in his palm, slowly stabbing at Lin Feng. The overall pressure of the green ocean remained the same, but there were suddenly many more undercurrents in it. The whole ocean flashed with blue luster, but these undercurrents were plated with a layer of dim yellow outside the green. The surging undercurrents and the seemingly solid ocean did not interfere with each other, existing together in perfect harmony. And wherever these dim yellow undercurrents passed, the small world formed by Lin Feng's yin and yang dust grains immediately began to gradually collapse. The lunar true water and the mixed element true water have both reached the top realm, and under the combination, there are new changes. What a good infinite azure sea incantation. The lunar true water and the netherworld true water have both reached the top realm, and under the combination, there are new changes. What a good infinite azure sea incantation. Even when Lin Feng saw this technique, he nodded his head repeatedly and cheered. Even though you are not outstanding among the past emperors in terms of fighting techniques, but with the Taiyin True Water as your foundation, you can be said to have reached the pinnacle in terms of attainments in water techniques. In that case, why don't you let me see your infinite sea incantation again? As he spoke, Lin Feng put his palms together, and the power of the yin and yang return to origin magical realm was exerted, as if it was reshaping heaven and earth, and all things returned to their origin. The infinite azure sea, which was flashing with a blue luster and was about to suppress him, suddenly shook violently. And the flickering dim yellow light, which was trying to break the yin and yang dust grains, immediately became unstable and was on the verge of disintegration. Lin Feng, who was like a bug trapped in amber, stepped forward and began to move forward in the infinite azure sea, and the green ocean in front of him began to recede. A mysterious and majestic force pressed against Xia Huang. Xia Huang frowned. This magical method is so strange. I can't see through it. I can't see through it. He curled his left index finger and made a ring with his thumb, while his middle finger, ring finger, and little finger stood side by side in front of his chest. He clenched his right hand into a fist and gently put it against the palm of his left hand. The surging lunar true water lay in front of Lin Feng, and it suddenly flashed with an icy blue luster. An extremely cold and ancient aura spread out, and all the lunar true water suddenly turned into green ice crystals, like a shield, in front of Xia Huang to protect him. This was the infinite sea incantation that Xia Huang had combined after he had cultivated the lunar true water and the netherworld true water to the top. Seeing this, Lin Feng laughed and said, "Good timing." As he laughed, he stretched out his palm and pressed it directly on the green crystals that looked like endless glaciers. The next moment, the green glaciers began to disintegrate. Chapter 1101. Lin Feng used the yin and yang restoration mystical realms mystique on his palm and pressed it on the surface of the emerald green glacier formed by Xia Huang's Emerald Sea Mystique underworld technique. The powerful and mysterious power shattered the glacier that seemed to have existed since ancient times. Xia Huang frowned slightly and was about to retreat. But at that moment, a black light flashed in the king of the underworld's eyes, and Xia Huang's body suddenly stiffened. With a sigh, Emperor Xia did not dodge or evade, heading straight towards Lin Feng. but he was going to ignore his own injuries, adopting a method of trading injury for injury. Lin Feng's attention was not on Xia Huang, but on the king of the underworld. He saw that the king of the underworld was flashing with red light and reaching into the void with one hand. The rest of his body was rolling with black light. The black light reached its peak and gradually flashed with white light, causing his entire body to seem like it was shrouded in a gray haze. And while this gray haze did not trigger the resonance of Heaven's Bane, it was very compatible with a red, chaotic void around it. The red, chaotic void was even nourishing the gray haze, causing it to become even thicker. King of the Underworld, in terms of cultivation, you have indeed blazed a new path and are unique. It is enough to leave your name in history. Lin Feng nodded. It was not that there were no people who reincarnated. The original spirit of a Mahayana Dharma treasure could also reincarnate as a human, but almost all such existences had to cultivate from the beginning. It was just that the path of their cultivation was much smoother than that of ordinary people. But for the king of the underworld to be able to improve his mystique and dharmic powers to such a level in just a decade or so after being reborn, it could be said that he was the one and only. During the battle of annihilating Xian at Yujing Mountain, the king of the underworld was only a child of 2 or 3 years old at the time, but he already possessed extremely powerful magical powers. It was enough to raise eyebrows. Compared to others who reincarnated and cultivated anew, rather than saying that the king of the underworld's strength had increased through cultivation, it would be more accurate to say that he had continuously regained his strength over an extremely short period of time, returning to his prime in the past. In the beginning, the speed of recovery was the fastest. However, in recent years, the speed of recovery had slowed down, and it had gradually shown that it was extremely difficult to make further progress. However, a true rebirth like this was absolutely shocking. Such a heaven-defying technique did not exist out of thin air. After careful observation, Lin Feng could confirm that the reason why the king of the underworld was able to recover his cultivation base so quickly was because he had created a unique technique that had never been seen before. And this unique mystique technique did indeed require the power of the Dark Sea. Xiaoyan, Zhu Yi, Yin Nanlai, Dao, Lord Qing Yi, and the others also frowned slightly. Setting aside everything else, in terms of cultivation base, this fiend is truly powerful and unparalleled. The king of the underworld looked at Lin Feng calmly. I do not wish to leave my name in history. The past, the present, and the future, all of history must be written by me. Only then will I be able to live up to the mandate of heaven. Lin Feng raised his brows slightly. Good spirit. It's a pity that whether you can do it or not is another matter. As he spoke, in the depths of Lin Feng's return to void Dharma body, in a location that others could not detect, a true spirit divine pattern shone brightly, corresponding to Lin Feng's return to void Dharma body. Everyone instantly felt as if the entire crimson void of chaos had trembled. Although everything before their eyes was still a vast expanse of crimson chaos, an image seemed to have appeared in everyone's mind. Within the dark, starry sky of the universe, boundless starlight flashed. The orbit of the stars that had followed since time immemorial seemed to have been guided by some kind of power and was undergoing a change. The power of the revolution of the stars was immense, let alone the power of the movement of tens of thousands of stars at the same time. Even the slightest change was enough to produce a boundless power that could flip heaven and earth upside down. As this boundless power descended, Xia Huang's body suddenly stiffened. In the next instant, the boundless power of the infinite blue sea technique blasted toward the king of the underworld. At the same time, Lin Feng also used his finger as a sword, and a streak of heaven-punishing sword chi pierced toward the king of the underworld. The king of the underworld was shocked. When he focused his attention, he was even more astonished. He wasn't able to seize control of Xia Fangyu from me. What's going on? The pupils of Lord Qing Dao, who was fighting with Taoist priest Blood River, as well as Yin Nanlai and the other big shots of the Taishu Temple, suddenly contracted. This is the remarkable technique that he used in the Sea of Stars all those years ago, the one that broke through our temple's heavenly void mystic light. A powerful attack was coming toward him, but a portion of his energy was still focused on heavenly bane. Even the king of the underworld frowned for a moment. However, although he was shocked, he did not panic. He did not retract his palm that had reached into the crimson void of chaos. His other hand formed a seal, and the dusky brilliance surrounding his body suddenly changed, turning into a huge wheel. This wheel was dim and lusterless. It was jet black, and it rotated soundlessly. It was not like the heavenly gates, all heaven's wheel, which operated the heavenly worlds. It was also not like the Buddhist sects Vajra wheel and Bodhi wheel, which understood karma. It was more similar to the reincarnation sect's 6 paths of reincarnation, but its power was already a notch higher. It was a concept that controlled the fate of life and death of all living beings in the 6 paths, as well as the changes in fate. As the wheel rotated, the 6 paths were indistinguishable. There was only life or death. The jet black wheel suddenly turned white as it rotated, flashing with dazzling white light. It was dazzling but not sharp, giving people hope of survival. Vitality, life, was also a path of survival. It was a narrow escape from death, a chance at life in a hopeless situation. As the white wheel rotated, it blocked Lin Feng's heaven-punishing sword qi. Although dense cracks immediately appeared on the white wheel, it still managed to block Lin Feng's sword. On the other side, Xia Huang, who was also attacking the king of the underworld, suddenly burst with dazzling black light. He suddenly seemed weak and powerless, and the infinite Azure Sea technique that was attacking the king of the underworld also became weak. Lin Feng raised his eyebrows slightly, and the heaven-punishing sword qi increased its power again. At the same time, he waved his other hand, and the cosmic light of extreme, celestial pole descended. The white wheel that was rotating suddenly slowed down. The increasingly fierce heaven-punishing sword qi forcibly split the white wheel apart and continued to slash at the king of the underworld. An ancient book suddenly appeared in front of the king of the underworld. He flipped through the mysterious book with his empty hand, and the dazzling splendor on the book suddenly turned into a huge pillar of light that shot out. This splendor quickly turned into a gray world of the dead. Every page seemed to be a world of its own, and every page seemed to record the life and death of thousands of living beings. This gray world seemed to be connected to the entire boundless universe, and it actually drew on some of the boundless universe's power. It was like the true home of the billions of living beings in the boundless universe after they died. Countless dead souls let out painful and silent wails. When people looked at this world of the dead, it was like they could see their own path of death, the end of life. Lin Feng's expression was calm, and the fierce heaven-punishing sword qi continued to slash down. You are the end of life and death, and I am the extermination of all things. Not only will I exterminate all living beings with consciousness, but I will also exterminate all things without consciousness. Even your Tao of life and death will be exterminated together. Under the sword, the gray world of the dead was immediately split open. Even the king of the underworld was shocked to see this. He looked at his palm that had reached into the void and finally sighed. He pulled his palm out again and put his palms together and suddenly closed the book of life and death. Under the full concentration of the king of the underworld, the world of the dead became more vast. Between the flashes of black light, countless faces appeared, and a majestic power forcibly resisted Lin Feng's heaven-punishing sword qi and began to push back. Lin Feng's expression did not change. He raised his right hand to the sky, and his index and middle fingers were like swords. The terrifying heaven-punishing sword qi appeared again, but it was condensed and not released. With Lin Feng's fingers as the center, a fierce and domineering black light spread in all directions. A thick column of blood-red gas also extended from the tip of Lin Feng's finger, shooting into the sky, as if it was going to pierce through the red, chaotic void. Countless black light flashed, condensing into black light swords, floating around the blood-red gas column. Under the power of thousands of black light swords and blood-red gas column, hundreds of millions of complex formation patterns gradually took shape, flashing with black light, turning into a huge and fierce sword formation. It was Lin Feng's heaven-punishing sword formation. At this moment, the netherworld sea seemed to be turbulent, and Heaven's Bane seemed to be resonating with Lin Feng, and this resonance was both hostile and joyful. In this netherworld sea that was full of calamities and tribulations, the power of the heaven-punishing sword formation that Lin Feng had set up was vaguely stronger than in the outside world. For a time, a monstrous evil aura swept through the entire void of the universe, and even the stars and galaxies dimmed. Under the guidance of the sword's edge, boundless black light covered the sky, filling everyone's vision. It was ferocious beyond compare, and the evil aura of annihilation was almost suffocating. The king of the underworld, who was facing it directly, felt that the red chaotic void in his vision had disappeared. Xiao Huang and Blood River Daoist evil souls had disappeared. Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, Yin Nanlai, Dao Lord Qing Wan, and the others had also disappeared, and even Lin Feng was nowhere to be seen. As far as the eye could see, only a huge blood-red sword could be seen, as if the entire world had become a peerless evil sword that could destroy the creation of the world. The overwhelming blood-red sword's edge fell, sweeping up the splendor in the sky and shattering it. The king of the underworld let out a muffled grunt, and his magic power merged with the Book of Life and Death to block Lin Feng's heaven-punishing sword formation. But at some point, Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger had also suddenly appeared in front of him, revealing its original form. The huge dragon's body was constantly changing between flesh and blood, and light and shadow. The magic power of the yin and yang unification mystical realm immediately enveloped the king of the underworld and the Book of Life and Death. The king of the underworld's pupils suddenly shrank, and he wanted to fight back, but the black and white divine light on Lin Feng's body suddenly illuminated the void, causing the chaotic red in the surrounding space to dim. Endless heavenly Tao hymns rang out, and Lin Feng's creation divine light was added to the heaven-punishing sword formation, pressing down aggressively so that the king of the underworld could not be distracted. And at this moment, the yin and yang unification mystical realm had already landed on the king of the underworld, and it began to take effect. The void twisted violently, and the scene in front of everyone suddenly changed. Although the king of the underworld was still standing in the red, chaotic void, a black vortex that flashed with red light appeared beneath him. The king of the underworld's entire body was submerged in that black vortex from his knees down, as if he was immersed in it. Chapter 11:02. Under the effect of the yin and yang origin magical realm of Lin Feng's Thunder Dragon Doppelganger, the body of the Emperor of the Underworld started to float up slowly, as if he was about to break away from that black whirlpool. Yin Nanlai, Dao, Master Qing Yi, and the others also looked at the black vortex, which was flashing with red light. The method he used to restore his cultivation after his rebirth is indeed related to the netherworld sea. Seeing this, the Underworld Emperor let out a muffled groan, and his body gradually froze, no longer floating up. However, Lin Feng's original body activated the Heaven Punishment Sword Formation, which pressed down on the king of the underworld with overwhelming force. The violent and ferocious sword essence was almost suffocating. On the other side, Lin Feng's Thunder Dragon Doppelganger continued to operate the magic power of the yin and yang returning to origin magical realm. The doppelganger of the Thunder Dragon slashed down one after another. The Emperor of the Netherworld was overwhelmed, and his body began to float up from the black whirlpool again. Dao Master Qing Yi, who was standing to one side, let out a long roar. The Taishu mysterious light around him surged and spread out. Tao Master Ching, he put his palms together, and the mysterious light enveloped his body. The heavenly true water, which had been condensed into a line, also spread out and covered Tao Master Ching Yi's body. It combined with the Taishu mysterious light, making her seem like she had turned into a ray of water light. She suddenly rushed out of the encirclement of Taoist blood rivers, thousands of netherworld blood lotuses. However, this forced break also made her protective heavenly true water and the light of the Taishu temple dim. Taoist blood rivers' eyes flashed fiercely, and it was unprecedentedly terrifying. He changed his hand seals, and the blood cloud above his head suddenly began to tumble violently, like boiling water. Huge blood bubbles burst, and a thick blood mist drifted in the air. Filthy blood rivers flowed out and converged in the void, gradually forming a heart-like sphere. This sphere looked both like a heart and a huge drop of blood. The meridians on its surface were like veins, and they were even beating constantly. A powerful and ferocious aura spread out, making people's hearts palpitate. It was as if they were facing the filthiest and evilest existence in the world. Blood River Cultivator took out the Blood River Tao fruit that he had cultivated. Apart from the Blood River fruit's own foul and evil aura, what was even more eye-catching was that after the Tao fruit appeared, the red, chaotic void formed by the power of heavenly misfortune trembled slightly, and the magic power of Man Blood River became even more vigorous and ferocious. In the void, there seemed to be an infinite amount of filthy Blood River, true water flowing in a Taoist Blood River's Tao fruit. Seeing this, Zhu Yi frowned slightly. He can use his Tao fruit to draw in the Blood River, true water from the Dark Sea. The true Blood River water was one of the most ferocious calamities in the Netherworld Sea. Here, there was the boundless Netherworld Blood Sea and the surging Blood River. If he were to fight in the Netherworld Sea, the other calamities and tribulations would also affect Blood River Taoist. But now that he was in the space created by the power of heavenly tribulation, Blood River Taoist no longer had any misgivings. He wantonly absorbed the power of the Blood River true water to increase his strength. Tao Master Ching Yi's expression didn't change. This was what she had expected. However, in this way, she could no longer go to the king of the underworld. Tao Master Ching Yi let out a soft cry and spread his hands flat to both sides. Two streams of air, one black and one white, circled in his left hand and turned into a half-black and half-white Tao fruit. On the surface of the Tao fruit, black and white stripes crisscrossed. On her right hand, rays of golden light and white clouds fused together, converging into a dazzling Tao fruit. A large number of dazzling talisman characters floated out, turning into golden clouds that floated around the Tao fruit. This scene fell into everyone's eyes. Lin Feng also looked back slightly and said, "It really is a double Tao fruit, but it also highlights the problem." Tao Master Ching, he put his palms together, and a Tao fruit in each hand flashed with a strong light. In the dazzling light, the two Tao fruits seemed to merge into one, but also seemed to disappear at the same time. The great void mystic light around Tao Master Ching, he suddenly became stronger. This strengthening was not an increase in the brightness of the light. The light still didn't look dazzling or eye-catching, but it was more mysterious and unpredictable. It was indescribable and elusive. In the light, a 9-story pagoda seemed to appear. It reached into the sky and led everyone in the world to the sky. This shining pagoda landed on Taoist Blood River's Blood River fruit and immediately sucked it in. At this moment, the Blood River fruit of the Tao also shook and undulated, as if it was about to be sucked away by the pagoda in the Taishu mysterious light. Taoist Blood River's expression was not surprised, but it became slightly serious. His snow-white hair flew in the air and gradually turned from snow-white to blood-red. His snow-white robe seemed to be stained with a thick layer of blood. His entire robe had turned into a blood-red robe. A sound suddenly came from the Blood River fruit, as if an extremely vicious life was letting out a low roar. Suddenly, It stopped shaking and undulating. Instead, it began to try to defile the pagoda in the light. For a moment, the two sides fell into a deadlock. But on the other side, Lin Feng's original body and Brontosaurus's clone attacked together. This immediately put great pressure on the king of the underworld. Lin Feng didn't want to hurt him. Instead, he let the king of the underworld's body float up from the black whirlpool that was like a deep pool. "Senior brother Qingning, please protect junior brother Wu," Yin Nanlai said in a low voice. He gently raised his left hand, and a rune that looked simple and was only drawn with a few strokes gradually appeared on the back of his left hand. It was a rune that seemed to be formed by a few strokes, but it contained an extremely mysterious concept. The aura of power that this rune revealed caused everyone in Xianmen Tianzong to look at it. Is that the Taishu mark that has been passed down by the previous temple masters of the Taishu temple? The Taishu mark on Yin Nanlai's left hand flickered and gradually turned into a mysterious and elusive light. It was the Taishu mysterious light that filled the sky. Under the protection of the Taishu mysterious light, he walked step by step through the muddy red, chaotic void towards the king of the underworld. Seeing this, the king of the underworld frowned slightly. A black light flashed in his eyes. The eyes of Xia Huang's evil soul also flashed with a violent black light. He put his palms together, and streams of transparent water started to gather in front of him. It wasn't the dark green Tine True Water, the dim yellow Springs True Water, the azure mixed origin True Water, or the icy blue Xianming True Water. It was just an ordinary transparent stream of water. However, it contained a feeling of the great Tao being the simplest. This transparent stream of water formed a Tao fruit in front of Xia Huang. It looked like a pill cauldron. Xia Huang let out a soft shout. A huge amount of Tine True Water also formed a huge cauldron in front of him. Its appearance and shape were exactly the same as Ding of Shenzhou. Under Xia Huang's control, his pill cauldron-like Tao fruit merged with the Ding of Shenzhou. Then, within this dark green cauldron, the Yellow Springs True Water, the Xianming True Water, and the Mixed Origin True Water gathered together. Then, they started to churn nonstop, as if they were boiling. Xia Huang pushed the dark green cauldron with his palms and sent it crashing towards Yin Nanlai. "Xia Huang, I'm sorry." Yin Nanlai's expression was calm. He opened his palms in front of him. A Tao fruit appeared in each of his palms. One came from the supreme Wang Qing Dao, while the other came from the void Yin Yang Dao. The Taishu mark on his left hand flashed with light. It supported the two Tao fruits. As Yin Nanlai put his palms together, the light shone brightly. In the center of the light, it was so dazzling that it was hard to see clearly. However, the more it spread out, the gentler the light became. However, it also became more mysterious and unfathomable. It transformed into an unpredictable Taishu mystic light that spread out and wrapped around the dark green cauldron that was falling towards him. The cauldron shook slightly and turned around to crash in the direction of the king of the underworld. The king of the underworld's expression did not change. He did not react at all. However, Xia Huang blocked in front of the dark green cauldron. His palms once again pushed the cauldron that was flying towards him. The dark green cauldron immediately changed direction and once again crashed towards Yin Nanlai. Yin Nanlai's body was protected by the Taishu mystic light. Once again, he managed to divert Xia Huang's attack. However, he frowned slightly. This was because he could feel that it was becoming more and more difficult for him to divert Xia Huang's dark green cauldron. At the same time, as he diverted the dark green cauldron, his body became unstable. It was as if he could be thrown into Xia Huang's cauldron at any time. A huge suction force came from Xia Huang's cauldron. It was as if a huge beast had opened its mouth and wanted to swallow Yin Nanlai whole. He had long heard of the methods that Xia Huang used to cook the great demon. However, before the king of the underworld came back to life and Shoichi Dashin brought back the truth about Xia Huang's death, Yin Nanlai had never expected that he would experience it personally. As for the various methods that the king of the underworld had, Yin Nanlai now had a deep understanding of them. Putting aside the fact that Tao Lord Qing Yi and the Blood River Taoist were locked in a stalemate, even though Yin Nanlai had the Taishu mystic seal, he was now at a disadvantage against Xiao Huang. However, as Xiao Huang dealt with Yin Nanlai, the situation on the King of the Underworld side did not improve in the slightest. Under the effect of Lin Feng's yin and yang unification, wondrous realms, supernatural power, the King of the Underworld was also constantly breaking away from the black vortex beneath him. Lin Feng sensed carefully and nodded. As expected, my previous feeling was correct. Even when he was fighting with me, I could feel that his overall strength was constantly increasing. Or rather, I should say that he is constantly recovering to his peak state in the past. Although the enhancement is very subtle and almost undetectable in a short period of time, it is real and continuous. As the King of the Underworld kept breaking away from the black vortex, Lin Feng could also feel that the king's strengthening, or rather recovery, was constantly slowing down and was close to being interrupted. When he completely broke away from the black vortex, the speed at which he recovered his cultivation would also come to a halt. The King of the Underworld clearly realized this as well. He looked at Lin Feng expressionlessly and said, "Master of the Celestial Sect of Wonders, good move." The black light in his eyes kept flashing, and the black light flashing in the eyes of Xiao Huang and the Blood River Taoist reached an unprecedented peak in an instant. In the next moment, the two of them risked being seriously injured by Tao Lord Qing Yi and Yin Nanlai. They completely gave up on their own defense and turned around to pounce on Lin Feng. Another Blood River fruit and another divine prefecture furnace fruit of Wei were condensed and smashed towards Lin Feng. Chapter 11:03. As Xia Huang and Taoist Blood River attacked Lin Feng together, the King of the Underworld's eyes had turned completely black, like the darkest abyss in the world. Rays of gray light flew out and condensed into 3 Tao fruits that were half black and half white. Although these 3 life and death underworld Tao fruits did not contain the evil souls of experts, they still emitted powerful waves of magic power. Originally, he had prepared them to defend against Lin Feng's Brontosaurus clone or Zhu Yi's golden Permetha bridge attacks. However, at this moment, Lin Feng's yin and yang unification mystical realm magic power kept wearing down the King of the Underworld's magic power. The ritual he used to recover his cultivation was about to be destroyed, and he could no longer hold back. The 3 life and death underworld Tao fruits all burned, turning into rolling black light that protected the King of the Underworld, forming a huge black sacrificial altar. The sacrificial altar was 3 levels high. The bottom level was dead silent, like a place of eternal rest. The middle level was bustling, like all living things in the human world. At the top level, it was vast and ethereal, like the vast sky, but also like a supreme ruler, indifferently looking down on the human world and the netherworld. The 3 images of heaven, earth, and man, the cycle of life and death, and the ruler of the netherworld perfectly fused, forming a seemingly supreme and powerful aura. Above the netherworld primordial destruction curse, the King of the Underworld's most powerful magic power, the netherworld ritual that only the King of the Underworld himself knew. Moreover, it completely gave up on attacking, suppressing the netherworld ritual with all its strength. The book of life and death in front of the King of the Underworld flipped repeatedly, and the grand world of the dead appeared. Under the blessing of good fortune, the power of the magic treasure and man perfectly fused, supporting each other. Under the suppression of such a powerful force, the King of the Underworld's movement of rising from the black vortex suddenly stopped and even began to fall again. Even Lin Feng's peerlessly ruthless heaven-punishing sword formation above his head could not break the black sacrificial altar that the King of the Underworld and the Book of Life and Death had created together. Seeing this, Lin Feng nodded. Extraordinary indeed. Although that was what he said, Lin Feng's expression did not change. The terrifying sword formation, with the viciousness of heaven and earth as its edge, attacked continuously as if there was no end. It constantly broke through the king of the underworld's protective blacklight, forcing him to constantly replenish it to support the sacrificial altar. At the same time, Huang and Taoist Blood River's attacks had already reached Lin Feng. Lin Feng's main body didn't even look back. His Thunder Dragon clone let out another long roar, as if causing the heavenly river to tremble and the stars to change their paths. The majestic power that shook the star orbit was reflected back on the Thunder Dragon's avatar. As the huge dragon swayed, the world seemed to be overturned. The Huang Lin's true sect Tian's Huang families won. The attacks of Taoist Blood River and Xia Huang paused slightly in the void. In the next moment, they began to attack the king of the underworld. They were like arrows that had left the bow, unable to be stopped. A sharp light flashed in the king of the underworld's eyes. As expected, it is more difficult to deal with than the Taishu mystic light of Taishu Temple. It feels like it might be able to restrain the Taishu mystic light of Taishu Temple. In the blink of an eye, under the king of the underworld's control, Taoist Blood River and Xia Huang's evil souls surged with thick black light. This caused them to instantly become weak, making it difficult for them to cause any effective damage to the black sacrificial altar that the king of the underworld had condensed with the netherworld ritual divine power. However, this also gave Yin Nanlai and Dao Master Qing an opportunity to attack. Originally, Taoist Blood River and Xia Huang had been forced to return to attack Lin Feng. This left them wide open. Now that their strength was severely weakened, they were immediately heavily injured by Yin Nanlai and Dao Master Qing's attacks. Although black light flickered in the Emperor of the Underworld's eyes, and the power of Taoist Blood River and Emperor Xia instantly grew stronger after a brief moment of weakness. This change, in an extremely short period of time, was considered extremely long for experts like Yin Nanlai and Dao Master Qing. As the light flashed, Taoist Blood River and Xia Huang's evil souls were simultaneously injured. Their bodies emitted a large amount of black light, as if they were bleeding profusely. After respectively repelling Taoist Blood River and Xia Huang's evil souls, Yin Nanlai and Dao Master Qing did not continue to pursue them. Instead, they focused their attention on the king of the underworld. At this moment, Lin Feng's Brontosaurus doppelganger also extended its right claw. Its right claw flashed with a golden light, and its strength was vigorous and ferocious. Similarly, it clawed at the black altar formed by the king of the underworld's underworld ritual. The heaven punishment sword formation activated by Lin Feng's main body did not relax for even a moment. In the face of such a fierce attack, even the king of the underworld could not withstand it with his current cultivation. He could only watch as the black altar disintegrated layer by layer. The king of the underworld glanced coldly at Lin Feng and the others. Without saying anything, he suddenly put his palms together. The black vortex beneath him suddenly stopped moving, and then it began to rapidly reverse. The black vortex directly threw the king of the underworld out of its own accord. The ritual he had used to restore his cultivation was interrupted just like that. However, within the rapidly reversing black vortex, streams of powerful energy began to surge incessantly. The entire black vortex seemed as if it was about to collapse. In the center of the black vortex, one could vaguely see the boundless calamities and tribulations of the netherworld sea churning as if they were about to gush out. The chaotic red void, created by the power of heavenly calamity, was also shaking violently. It seemed as if the netherworld sea outside had begun to surge with huge waves. Although the ritual had been interrupted, the king of the underworld knew that if he hesitated for even a moment, the consequences would not be as simple as having his cultivation interrupted. He might even lose his life in the netherworld sea. Under such circumstances, he could only choose to make a prompt decision and sacrifice his pawn to protect his chariot. Within the abyss-like darkness in the king of the underworld's eyes, a white light suddenly flashed. The eyes of the heavily injured Taoist blood river and Xia Huang also flashed with white light. The injuries on their bodies actually healed in an extremely short period of time. Then, they continued to attack Lin Feng, Yin Nan Lai, and the others. As the black vortex beneath the king of the underworld continued to reverse, the entire space became unstable. Xiao Yin and Wu Mengqi grunted at the same time. Images of the calamity of the netherworld sea flashed in their eyes as they tried to stop the netherworld sea from going berserk. However, the netherworld sea had always been chaotic and raging. Trying to bring order and stability to it was thousands of times more difficult than trying to lead it into an even more chaotic state. The king of the underworld did not attempt to control or drive the power of the netherworld sea at all. Instead, he tried to lead it into an even more chaotic state. Under such circumstances, if he could not completely control heavenly calamity, even if Xiao Yin and Wu Mengqi worked together, they would not be able to stop the king of the underworld's actions. The black vortex suddenly exploded and spread into the surroundings. The violent power of the netherworld sea penetrated the barrier of heavenly calamity and began to engulf and devour the red, chaotic void. Under such circumstances, heavenly calamity, which had merged with the netherworld sea, would not be damaged at all. It would merely be changing into a different state. However, Lin Feng, Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, Yinan Lai, Dao, Master Qing Yi, and the others would have to face the impact of the netherworld sea directly, and it was an extremely violent impact at that. At the same time, Xia Huang and the Blood River Taoist, who were under the king of the underworld's control and had no regard for their own safety, fiercely pounced on them and entangled them. The king of the underworld's eyes flashed with a faint red light. He took the opportunity to escape into the netherworld sea. His body swayed, and it looked like he was about to disappear. Where do you think you're going? Lin Feng's eyes turned slightly cold. He used his divine sense to send a message, little E. There was no need for further words. Zhu Yi understood what he meant. He lowered his body and slapped his palm on the Permitha Golden Bridge. The majestic golden bridge instantly traversed the void and fell toward the king of the underworld. The king of the underworld used the Book of Life and Death to block the Permitha Golden Bridge. However, Lin Feng himself had the wondrous Shaluo tree above his head, and endless light protected him. He used the celestial escape technique and forcefully passed through the netherworld sea's calamity. He activated the Heaven Punishment Sword formation and attacked the king of the underworld again. Forget it, forget it. The king of the underworld let out a long sigh. He pointed a finger, and another 3 life and death nether Dao fruits flew out. One of them was the Dao fruit that contained Xia Huang's phantasm soul. The 3 Dao fruits fused together, and Xia Huang's figure suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he had returned to the half-black, half-white Dao fruit. The next moment, the 3 Dao fruits shattered together, turning into rays of black light that contained Xia Huang's phantasm soul within the black sacrificial altar. The king of the underworld said coldly, "Sacrifice." Within the sacrificial altar, Xia Huang's expression was complicated. There was anger, relief, and even more desolation. His body began to slowly turn into dust on the black altar without making a single sound. The black sacrificial altar, which had completely activated the netherworld sacrificial rites to the extreme, grew stronger, more profound, and more evil. The sacrificial altar continued to expand, and it even caused the netherworld sea's calamity to shake. Its momentum became more and more terrifying. It also became more and more chaotic. It was as if the entire world had become a tsunami, and the waves crashed toward Lin Feng and the others. It was as if doomsday had arrived. Yin Nan Lai, Dao Master Qing Yi, Wu Mengqi, Dao Master Qing Ning, and the others watched as Xia Huang's figure gradually disappeared, and they all sighed. Xia Huang, who was gradually turning into dust within the sacrificial altar, had a slightly clearer look in his eyes. He looked at the collapsing red chaotic void, and slowly he said, "To be completely annihilated here, and to have Tao brother Qiyang watch me die, it is also fate. You owe him, and you can't repay him." Lin Feng said indifferently, before Jihuang Xinyuan ascended to the top, "If it weren't for Wen Qiang, you would have died at the hands of the extreme emperor, the saint emperor of the demon race, Chu Lang Tongtian." This matter passed through Wen Qiang's memory, and it almost didn't leave a mark. He didn't take it to heart, and you didn't either. As for your battle with Jihuang Xinyuan, there's no need to even mention it. Xiao Huang sighed. Hatred blinds one's eyes, and the sins of the past have already been committed. Now that things have come to this, there's no point in talking about it anymore. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. I really can't repay what I owe. As he sighed, Xiao Huang's evil soul completely disappeared, and the sacrificial altar of darkness that had enveloped him exploded with a loud bang, sweeping out in all directions. Lin Feng shook his head, and a speck of light flashed between his brows. A huge spell formation unfurled, and a four-legged square cauldron appeared in the center of the formation, suppressing heaven and earth. The yin and yang life and death formation unleashed the boundless power of yin and yang to block the violent attack of the king of the underworld's netherworld ritual. Meanwhile, in the depths of Lin Feng's return to void Dharma body, the true spirit divine inscriptions flashed once again, and a mysterious power caused the stars to sway. Under the majestic power, the surging netherworld sea also swept toward the king of the underworld. Chapter 1104. The waves of the netherworld sea had gone completely berserk, sweeping across the sky. The red chaotic void kept shattering. Even Xiao Yin and Wu Mengqi could not continue to communicate with Heaven's Bane and were shaken away from it. Yin Nanlai and Dao Master Qing Yi were also blocked by the power of the netherworld sea. They had no choice but to stop and resist the invasion. Lin Feng narrowed his eyes slightly. Light flashed in his eyes as he unleashed his magical powers and pushed through the waves of the netherworld sea. The heaven punishment sword formation pointed straight at the king of the underworld. The king of the underworld raised the book of life and death and grunted. In the void, amidst the chaotic netherworld sea, black light could be seen flowing as if blood was splashing. But this did not make the king of the underworld lose his composure. But then, the violent waves of the netherworld sea finally engulfed him. As the waves shook violently, the king of the underworld's eyes flashed with red light. This red light was the same as the radiance of Heaven's Bane. At this moment, it was unprecedentedly dazzling, but there was a sense of struggle at the end of the road. After a moment, the red light in the king of the underworld's eyes exploded, turning into specks of red light that drifted into the violent waves of the netherworld sea. At this moment, the king of the underworld's expression suddenly changed. He looked down and saw a remnant stone of Heaven's Bane in his left palm. But the rubble was gradually disintegrating, turning into powder that was also engulfed by the netherworld sea. The underworld sea grew more and more violent. The underworld emperor suddenly raised his head and stared at Lin Feng, who was in the distance. His eyes, which had turned completely black, were ice-cold, devoid of any emotion. The violent power of the netherworld sea began to attack the king of the underworld's body, causing him a huge backlash. Because it came from within, the king of the underworld situation was even more difficult than that of Lin Feng, Yin Nanlai, and Dao Master Qing Yi. The king of the underworld closed his eyes in pain. He swept up the book of life and death and sank into the waves of the netherworld sea, gradually disappearing. Lin Feng withdrew the heaven punishment sword formation. With an indifferent expression, he completely unfolded the yin and yang life and death formation. Ding of Shenzhou suppressed it, and Lin Feng controlled it himself. His power was raised to the extreme. Although it could not stabilize the netherworld sea, it could temporarily maintain a pure land in the midst of the frenzied waves. Zhu Yi's golden nirvana bridge brought Xiao Yin and the others to the world of creation formed by Lin Feng's yin and yang life and death formation, bringing them into the formation. The people of Taishu Temple could only barely protect themselves in the midst of the raging heaven and earth tide. Yin Nanlai's expression was calm. The Taishu engraving on the back of his left hand shone brightly. Above his head, a hazy silhouette appeared, like a round mirror, protecting everyone in the Taishu Temple. It was the light of the Hao Yin mirror. Wherever the light shone, even the raging netherworld sea seemed to calm down a little. But just as the king of the underworld had said, when the power of the Hao Yin mirror's aura appeared, a soundless crazy roar came from the netherworld sea, as if there was an enraged giant. But this giant was in the netherworld sea and seemed to be everywhere. Because of this, it was not completely enraged. The aura that leaked out was more of vigilance and hostility. Lin Feng glanced at the Taishu Temple and shook his head slightly. If the chaotic void created by the power of the heavenly disaster had shown just now, I'm afraid it would have immediately enraged the heavenly disaster and attracted all the power of the netherworld sea to attack. Now, the situation is fine. As long as the true body of the Hao Yin mirror does not enter the netherworld sea, the conflict should not escalate further. But it's a pity that in the end, the king of the underworld still escaped. In the future, if we want to find this teenage mutant ninja turtle again, we will have to spend more effort. This time, the king of the underworld's vitality was greatly damaged. Not only did he lose Xia Huang's evil soul, he was also heavily injured. More importantly, he had suffered the backlash of the netherworld sea, which cut off any chance of fighting for control of the heavenly disaster in the netherworld sea in the future. Also, the ritual to borrow the power of the netherworld sea to recover his cultivation had been interrupted. In the current situation, it was impossible to borrow the power of the netherworld sea to rebuild the ritual. I just don't know how the situation is on Yiming's side. If he transfers his control of the netherworld sea to the king of the underworld, then the king of the underworld still has a chance to plot against the netherworld sea again. But if he is really, as I suspect, and is devoured by that Shun Zhe, then the king of the underworld will also be in trouble. Lin Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. The environment is still too poor. For a moment just now, Lin Feng even wanted to unseal the heaven punishing sword. Among all the enemies that he had encountered in his life, the king of the underworld endurance skills were at the peak, and he could be said to be the #1 teenage mutant ninja turtle. This kind of opponent, Lin Feng would never underestimate. But if he really unsealed the heaven punishing sword, then he would not have to worry about dealing with the king of the underworld. His opponents would instantly become heavenly disaster and the netherworld sea, which was really a pain in the ass. But still, it feels a little strange. Lin Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. His behavior is a little strange. Why would he do that? As he was thinking, Lin Feng suddenly had a thought. He turned his head to look at the netherworld sea waves that were sweeping wildly outside. After the last bit of red, chaotic void completely collapsed, in the raging netherworld sea, a streak of reddish-gold radiance rose faintly, flickering continuously. As the reddish-gold radiance flickered, countless talisman patterns emerged from it. It was as if the scorching sun was in the sky, incomparably glorious and dazzling. For a moment, the entire dark netherworld sea seemed to be illuminated, and the world became white. Lin Feng was slightly stunned. Is this when Qiang's creation divine light of the past? After so many years of death, it can still survive? Under the intentional concealment of the Taishu Temple, very few people knew about Wen Qiang's daily life. However, the powerful strength that he had used to fight against the heavens and earth, as well as the past and present, was still widely known. After all, apart from the last battle of his life in the Middle Era, many people had witnessed many large-scale battles, especially the war between the two worlds. And one of the things that people loved to talk about was that when Qiang had also built a supreme spirit platform, built a supreme pill cauldron, formed a purple core, and produced a phenomenon, and finally formed a nascent soul and obtained the creation divine light. In the ancient era, when he was defending the divine continent, the powerful creation divine light was also one of his great dermic powers, which deterred the demons in the vast land of infinite mainland from acting recklessly. Lin Feng had originally thought that when Qiyang had already died, and his body and spirit had been destroyed. Logically speaking, the creation divine light should have also disappeared, leaving behind at most some crystals. However, perhaps when Qiyang had already merged with the netherworld sea and the heavenly calamity before his death. Even though he had died, he had completely disappeared in the netherworld sea. As a result, his creation divine light actually attached itself to the red chaotic void created by the power of the heavenly calamity. As the chaotic void collapsed and disintegrated, when Qian's creation divine light finally saw the light of day again. The creation divine light that was like the sun in the midday sky was like a brilliant sun, illuminating the entire netherworld sea. Then it began to dim, as if the sun was gradually setting. After escaping from the heavenly calamity, the creation divine light was, after all, an object without an owner. Naturally, it would dissipate between heaven and earth. Its grandmaster, Qi Yang's 9-sun divine light, Yin Nan Lai, Dao Master Qing Yi, and the others were also astonished. Wu Mingqi stared at the reddish-gold creation divine light and said, "It's about to completely disappear." The Taishu engraving in Yin Nanlai's left hand flickered, and the hazy mirror light above his head split off to cover the reddish-gold light. However, as the mirror light strengthened slightly, the pressure from the netherworld sea and the heavenly calamity on their side also increased, making it difficult for the mirror light to move. Lin Feng glanced at the people in the Taishu temple and said, "Why aren't Tai, Jingyi, and the others here? What are they busy with?" As he thought about it, Lin Feng's left hand changed the incantation gesture, and his right palm opened. Layers of magic formations flashed and gathered together, operating the yin and yang birth and death technique. He used his own magic power to construct another yin and yang birth and death formation. After merging with the primitive magic formation supported by the formation diagram treasure, it was like a broad road extending out of the world formed by the primitive magic formation, extending towards the creation divine light of the 9-sun left behind by Wen Qiyang. Zhu Yi put his palms together, and the Permitha bridge flew up and merged with the road, crossing the netherworld sea together. Lin Feng glanced at the reddish-gold light, then turned to Xiao Yin and said, "Xiao Yin, test it." Xiao Yan's heart moved slightly, and he nodded and stepped onto the Permitha bridge. Zhu Yi activated the golden bridge, sending Xiao Yin to the front of the reddish-gold light. "You," Wu Mengqi's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "That belongs to my temple." Wu Mengqi's words came to an abrupt halt midway. He was dumbfounded for a moment. Dao Master Qing Ning was also slightly stunned. Yin Nanlai and Dao Master Qing Yi, who had always been calm and composed, also revealed surprised expressions. They saw Xiao Yin arrive in front of the creation divine light of the 9-sun. He formed a seal with both hands, and a fiery light flashed in his eyes. Finally, he shot out a flame-like light mist, wrapping the divine light of the 9-sun. If that was all, Yin Nanlai, Wu Mengqi, and the others would not be too surprised. However, after the divine light of the 9-sun was captured by Xiao Yin, it kept vibrating. After a short period of trembling, it actually took the initiative to enter between Xiao Yan's eyebrows. Wu Mengqi was immediately stunned. It was not that the creation divine light of the 9-sun could not be transferred, but there were many restrictions, making it extremely difficult. He was a direct disciple of Wen Qiang's lineage, and had also obtained the legacy of Wen Qiang, so he had the power to activate the power of the netherworld sea. However, it was not so easy for him to collect the creation divine light of the 9-sun. Dao Master Qing Ning turned to look at Yin Nanlai and Dao Master Qing Yi. Did the master of the celestial sect do something? In the battle between the two Sure brothers in the Dragon Arena of West Hill City, With the help of Lin Feng, Shi Tianhao also easily collected the ultimate divine light that should have belonged to him, but was stolen by Shi Tianyi. Dao Master Qing, he shook his head and said in a deep voice, "It's not the same." The master of the celestial sect did not help, but it was not as easy for Xiao Yin as it was for Shi Tianhao back then. Shi Tianhao obtained the ultimate divine light of the Nine Sun and could almost immediately use it at that time. Xiao Yin only collected it temporarily. The divine light of the Nine Sun still does not belong to him. Whether he can use it in the end is also unknown. However, the possibility is very high. Yin Nanlai said in a low voice, "It was so easy to collect it. Not only did the divine light of the Nine Sun not reject him, but it was also very close to him. It was even closer to us than Junior Brother Wu." Dao Master Qingming's expression was incomparably complicated. He could not help but look at the netherworld sea in front of him. Could it be that ancestor Scarlet Sun? Dao Master Qing Yi Yananlai and Wu Mengqi shook their heads together. Ancestor Scarlet Sun was completely destroyed. There is no divine sense or Dharma power left in the divine light of creation. There is no Ancestor Scarlet Sun's consciousness left behind. This is purely a kind of closeness to the origin. Yin Nanlai sighed and looked at Xiao Yin. "I just don't know why. Maybe it's because Xiao Yin is closer to Tian, Yi, and the netherworld sea. But as for why, no matter how much I think about it, I can't figure it out." Seeing Xiao Yin collect the divine light of the Nine Sun and be brought back to the yin and yang life and death formation by the Golden Permitha Bridge, everyone in Taishu Temple felt bitter. Wu Mingqi was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.